Welcome, dear friends, to Fox Novel Tales, where every page we turn together opens a doorway into another world. Tonight, we embark on a journey not just into a story, but into the very heart of what it means to seek truth in a city that thrives on shadows, to find connection where only suspicion should bloom. You know those moments when a story grips you so tightly, its characters whisper in your thoughts long after you've closed the book. This is one of those tales, a tapestry woven with the shimmering threads of neon and the stark, brutal beauty of a city's darkest corners. It's a dance of wits and hearts, a perilous ballet where every step could lead to discovery or disaster, and frankly, you probably wouldn't make it through this without a good cup of tea and a comfy chair. This entire story, a labyrinth of emotions and intrigue, is meticulously crafted by Fox Novel Tales, designed to pull you into its reflective depths. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And please, if this tale resonates, share it with someone who might appreciate its intricate beauty wherever they are in the world, whatever time it might be. Now, let us draw near, as the words lift off the page and carry us into a world that feels both distant and impossibly close. The city, a glittering beast of glass and steel, exhaled its toxic breath into the bruised twilight, a familiar, acrid perfume that clung to my coat like a second skin. Neon signs, like open wounds on the night's canvas, bled their vibrant hues onto rain-slicked streets, painting a deceptive veneer over the city's festering underbelly. It was here, amidst the concrete canyons and shadowed alleys, that the Confessor prowled, leaving behind macabre tableaux of judgment against societies forgotten and reviled. Each victim, a meticulously chosen canvas for a chilling message, was posed with an artistry that spoke of a disturbed genius, a twisted philosopher wielding death as his brush. The public was gripped by a morbid fascination, a terror mingled with a strange, dark admiration for the killer's theatricality. My name is Anya Sharma, or at least it was. My soul bore the scars of a past betrayal, a wound inflicted by a case gone wrong, a partner who had turned to ash in my hands, leaving me with a hollow ache and a resolve as sharp as broken glass. I was a homicide detective, driven by a fierce, almost desperate need for justice, a personal vendetta against the deception that had once unraveled my world. My professional exterior was a fortress, but beneath it, a quiet yearning for connection, for something true, flickered like a dying ember. Sharma, my office, now. Ramon Gutierrez, head of homicide, his voice a gravelly summons, had pulled me from the sterile glow of my desk lamp and the cold comfort of an unsolved cold case. He was a man of sharp angles and sharper instincts, and his summons always heralded a storm. I strode into his office, the scent of stale coffee and impending doom hanging heavy in the air. He gestured to the overflowing whiteboard behind him, a chaotic collage of crime scene photos, cryptic notes, and a chilling sketch of a figure in a hooded cloak. "The Confessor," he grunted, his gaze fixed on my face, searching for any flicker of weakness. "Another one last night." A disgraced corporate lawyer, found in the shadowed alleys, posed with a single, meticulously carved rose petal over his heart. He was known for crushing smaller businesses, leaving countless families destitute. "The signature," I murmured, my eyes scanning the photos. "Always a judgment, always a reflection of the victim's perceived sin." "Precisely," Ramon continued, leaning forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And the public is eating it up, demanding answers. This isn't just a killer, Anya. This is a spectacle, and we're being outplayed." He slammed a file onto his desk. "We've got a prime suspect, Julian Vance." I knew the name. Julian Vance, the enigmatic and reclusive artist whose macabre sculptures and philosophical writings about societal decay and judgment had been gaining traction in the city's avant-garde circles. His work was unsettling, beautiful in a terrifying way, often exploring themes that echoed the Confessor's art. His alibis were thin, his movements often unaccounted for, and his public persona was both captivating and unnerving. He walked the line between genius and madman, a muse and a monster. "His work, it's too close," I said, a shiver tracing my spine despite myself. "The precision, the symbolism, it's almost a blueprint." Someone who can blend, who understands the nuances of that world, who can charm a snake out of its skin if necessary. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "You're the best we've got for this, Sharma. Unconventional, but effective. This requires a deep dive. Undercover. You'll be Lena Thorne, an art enthusiast with a discerning eye and a carefully crafted backstory. Your mission: infiltrate Julian Vance's world. Find out if he's our confessor." My stomach tightened, a familiar knot of apprehension and exhilaration. It was a dance of death and desire, a tango between a hunter and her prey, where the steps were measured in heartbeats and the rhythm was a slow, agonizing burn. I would shed my identity like a snake sheds skin. Anya Sharma, the haunted detective, would cease to exist. Lena Thorne, the art enthusiast, would rise from her ashes. The genesis of Lena Thorne was a meticulous, almost artistic process in itself. I immersed myself in art history, Julian's unsettling oeuvre, and the bohemian social circles he frequented. I pored over gallery catalogues, studied the nuances of contemporary sculpture, and practiced the casual, informed patter of a seasoned art collector. It was a stark contrast to my real life, a world of police reports, forensic analysis, and the brutal realities of human depravity. This mask I was creating, this new persona, felt almost liberating, a chance to escape the ghost of my past, even if it was just another form of deception. I secured an apartment in the labyrinthine apartment complex, an aging Art Deco building whose faded grandeur echoed the city's own decaying charm. It was, conveniently, Julian Vance's residence. My new apartment, a meticulously ordered sanctuary amidst the complex's charming decay, became my base of operations. Here, Anya could briefly shed Lena, but the vigilance never truly subsided. I unpacked my carefully curated wardrobe of subtly seductive dresses and oversized coats, each piece designed to shadow my figure in mystery, to hint at a story without revealing it. My raven black hair, usually pulled into a purposeful bun, was now styled in soft, artful waves, framing my dark, sharply expressive eyes. I looked in the mirror, a stranger staring back, a woman ready to step into the shadows and play a part that could either save a city or cost me everything. The game had begun. The air in the urban canvas gallery hummed with a pretentious energy, a cacophony of clinking glasses, hushed whispers, and the self-important drone of art critics dissecting meaning from splatters of paint. It was my first foray as Lena Thorne, and the mask felt both suffocatingly tight and exhilaratingly liberating. I moved through the throng, a phantom in a sleek obsidian dress that clung in all the right places, my carefully cultivated backstory humming in my veins. My mission was Julian Vance, but tonight I was merely an art enthusiast, adrift in a sea of abstract expressionism and performative admiration. I sipped a glass of lukewarm champagne, its bubbles doing little to quell the nervous flutter beneath my ribs. This wasn't a stakeout in a grimy alley. This was a battlefield of smiles and subtle glances, a place where a misplaced word could unravel weeks of preparation. I'd spent days studying Julian Vance, not just his art, but his habits, his associates, the way he held himself in public. He was a creature of calculated mystery, a silhouette against the city's harsh glare. His sculptures, dark and visceral, spoke of a profound unease, a disquiet that resonated with the city's own bruised heart. They were beautiful in a way that made you flinch, forcing you to confront the ugliness they depicted. And the Confessor's victims, each one a macabre tableau, seemed to echo Vance's thematic obsessions with judgment and societal decay. The connection was too strong to be coincidence, too chilling to ignore. My eyes scanned the room, searching for the man who was both my target and, perhaps, the monster I was hunting. He was a difficult man to miss, even in a room full of oversized personalities. He stood by a towering, skeletal sculpture of tangled metal and shadows, a piece titled "The Weight of Consequence," his back to the room, observing the observers. He was taller than I'd anticipated, his frame lean but powerful, exuding an almost predatory stillness. His dark hair, worn in artfully tousled elegance, caught the gallery lights, casting subtle highlights. I drifted closer, a moth to a dangerously compelling flame, pretending an intense interest in a nearby canvas that depicted a screaming city skyline. As I feigned contemplation, I caught a glimpse of him in the periphery of my vision. His profile was sharp, almost hawkish, his chiseled cheekbones catching the light. Then he turned, and I felt the full force of his gaze. Piercing steel blue eyes, set deep beneath dark brows, seemed to bore straight through the carefully constructed facade of Lena Thorne, past the layers of silk and studied nonchalance, right into the guarded core of Anya Sharma. It was an unsettling intensity, a feeling of being seen, truly seen, that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine, a sensation I hadn't felt in years. He held my gaze for a beat too long, a silent acknowledgement passing between us, before a faint, almost imperceptible curve touched his lips. It wasn't a smile of warmth, but one of knowing, of something ancient and unsettling. He approached, his movements fluid, unhurried, like a predator confident in its dominion. An interesting piece, wouldn't you agree? His voice, when he spoke, was a low, resonant hum, a cello string vibrating in the quiet hum of the gallery. It was exactly as I'd imagined from the few recordings I'd heard, deep, cultured, with an underlying gravel that hinted at sleepless nights and philosophical debates. The artist attempts to capture the urban scream, the silent agony of concrete and ambition. I turned, affecting a slight startle, then a practiced smile. Indeed, though I find myself wondering if the scream is from the city, or from those trapped within it, suffocating under its very weight. My voice, even to my own ears, sounded perfectly calibrated, intelligent, thoughtful, with just a hint of vulnerability. He regarded me, his eyes still searching, dissecting. A profound distinction, and one few are willing to make. He extended a long, elegant hand, perpetually stained with what looked like plaster and graphite. "Julian Vance, and you are?" "Lena Thorne," I replied, my hand sliding into his. His grip was firm, surprisingly warm, and a jolt, entirely unwelcome, shot through me. "It's an honor, Mr. Vance. Your work, it speaks to a part of the human condition few dare to articulate." "Lena Thorne," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue, his thumb brushing lightly against the back of my hand, a subtle intimacy that felt both accidental and deliberate. "A pleasure, Miss Thorne. And you find my art articulate?" He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Art to me," I began, launching into the carefully rehearsed lines, "is a mirror to the soul, not just of the artist, but of the society that spawns it. Your sculptures, particularly the weight of consequence, they don't just reflect, they dissect. They reveal the ugliness we prefer to keep hidden, the cracks in our gilded cages." I gestured vaguely towards his sculpture, admiring it with what I hoped was genuine awe. There's a raw honesty to it, a refusal to prettify the grotesque. It's hauntingly beautiful. He watched me, his expression unreadable, a silent battle of wits unfolding beneath the guise of polite conversation. "Hauntingly beautiful," he echoed, a faint, sardonic smile playing on his lips. "An apt description. I often find beauty in the shadows, Miss Thorne. It's where the truth often resides, unvarnished by the glare of expectation." "And the truth," I countered, my gaze meeting his, "can be a terrifying thing." "Only to those who fear what they might find within themselves," he replied, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more intimate. "Do you fear it, Lena Thorne?" The directness of the question, the casual use of my assumed first name, caught me off guard. It was a subtle probe, a test. I held his gaze, a slight smile playing on my lips. "I believe in facing truth, Mr. Vance, however uncomfortable it may be. It's the only way to truly understand the world and ourselves." He nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression replacing the earlier amusement. "A commendable philosophy, one I share in my own way." He gestured to the sculpture. "This piece, for instance. It was inspired by the endless cycle of judgment and retribution I observe in this city. How quickly we condemn, how eagerly we forget our own complicity." My internal recorder clicked on, documenting every nuance. His insights into human nature, his articulate observations, they were unsettlingly profound. They also dovetailed unsettlingly with the Confessor's modus operandi. "Do you believe in justice, Mr. Vance?" I asked, pushing the boundary slightly, watching for any tell. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if weighing my words. "Justice is a human construct, Miss Thorne, often flawed, often blind. What I believe in is consequence. Every action, every inaction carries a weight, and sometimes that weight becomes unbearable." He took a step closer, his presence almost overwhelming. "Tell me, Lena, what draws you to art that delves into such darkness?" "Perhaps because I believe that even in darkness there can be a strange kind of clarity," I said, choosing my words carefully. "A way to understand the monsters that walk among us, or perhaps the monsters that reside within us." I watched his eyes, searching for a flicker, a recognition, but his expression remained a perfectly crafted mask. "A fascinating perspective," he mused, his gaze still holding mine. "Most people prefer pretty landscapes, gentle portraits, things that soothe rather than provoke. I find solace in provocation." I lied smoothly, the words feeling surprisingly natural on my tongue. "It forces one to think, to question, and in questioning there is growth." "Growth," he repeated, a hint of something unreadable in his voice. "Or perhaps a deeper descent into the very questions you seek to answer." He paused, then offered, "There's another piece of mine, not currently on display, that explores this very theme. It's in my studio. Perhaps you'd be interested in seeing it sometime." My heart gave a jolt. This was it, the first crack in the wall, the invitation. "I would be honored, Mr. Vance, truly." I allowed a genuine smile to break through, a flash of the woman I was, mingled with the persona I had become. "Julian, please," he corrected, his eyes still fixed on mine, a strange intimacy blooming in the crowded gallery. "And you must call me Julian." "Julian," I repeated, the name feeling foreign yet oddly potent on my tongue. "Thank you." We fell into a conversation that stretched for what felt like hours, punctuated by the ebb and flow of other art patrons. He spoke of art as a mirror to the soul, his voice a low resonant hum that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. He spoke of the city's underbelly, not with disdain, but with a detached, almost scientific curiosity, as if observing a fascinating specimen. He never mentioned the Confessor directly, but every philosophical musing, every observation about the decay of morality felt like a veiled reference. He was a master of evasion, his answers precise yet yielding little. "The true artist," he mused, gesturing with his champagne flute, "doesn't just create, he observes. He absorbs the collective consciousness, the unspoken fears, the festering resentments of his era, and then he gives them form. Sometimes that form is beautiful. Sometimes it's a necessary ugliness." "And what do you observe, Julian?" I asked, leaning in slightly, my voice barely above a whisper. "What festering resentments do you see in our city?" He met my gaze, his eyes glinting. "The resentment of the forgotten, Lena. The rage of those who have been judged and discarded by a system that claims to be just, yet is profoundly unjust. The hypocrisy, the moral rot, it's everywhere if you only care to look." His words, though unsettling, were delivered with such quiet conviction that they almost sounded like a lament rather than a justification. Was this the killer speaking, or simply a deeply disillusioned artist? The lines were already beginning to blur. Later, as the gallery began to thin, he walked me to the entrance. The rain had started again, a soft, persistent drizzle that slicked the pavement and blurred the neon lights into impressionistic streaks of color. "Do you live far, Lena?" he asked, holding the heavy glass door open for me. "Not terribly," I replied, pulling my coat tighter around me. "Just a few blocks away, in the labyrinthine." A genuine smile, this time, touched his lips. "Ah, my esteemed neighbor. A building of character, wouldn't you agree? Full of stories if you know where to listen." "Indeed," I said, a small knowing smile of my own. "I've only just moved in, but I'm already charmed by its eccentricities." This was a detail I'd carefully planted, a small, seemingly innocuous piece of information that would later serve as a bridge. "Perhaps our paths will cross again, then, in the labyrinthine corridors," he said, his eyes twinkling with an almost boyish mischief. "Or perhaps sooner. I'll be in touch about that studio visit." "I look forward to it, Julian," I said, my voice warm, my heart hammering a strange rhythm against my ribs. I turned and walked into the rain, not looking back, but feeling the weight of his gaze on my retreating figure until I turned the corner. Back in my meticulously ordered sanctuary in the labyrinthine apartment complex, the mask of Lena Thorne began to slip, leaving Anya Sharma to grapple with the dizzying reality of her first encounter. I peeled off the obsidian dress, letting it fall in a silken pool on the floor, and moved to my hidden recording devices, carefully extracting the minuscule chip. The conversation, every inflection, every pregnant pause was now preserved. I transcribed it all, meticulously documenting every detail, every subtle shift in his expression, every evasive answer, his unsettling insights into human nature, his proximity to the recent crime scenes, the precise timing of his inspiration, coinciding with the discoveries in the shadowed alleys, was damning. The way he spoke of judgment, of consequence, of the city's moral decay, it was all there, a chilling echo of the Confessor's grim pronouncements. I replayed sections of our conversation, listening to his resonant voice, trying to find the crack in the facade, the tell that would scream killer. But all I heard was an articulate, intelligent man deeply engrossed in his art and his observations of the human condition. His quiet intelligence, his insightful observations about human nature chipped away at my certainty, a tiny, unfamiliar tremor beginning to stir beneath my steely resolve. He wasn't the snarling psychopath I had half expected. He was something far more insidious, far more complex. He was charming, yes, but also intensely perceptive, almost prescient. He had looked at me, truly looked at me, with an intensity that made me question my own reflections, the very nature of my carefully constructed identity. "He's good," I muttered to myself, staring at the transcript, the words blurring on the page. "He's damn good." My phone buzzed, a secure line from the cold precinct. It was Miller. "Anything, Lena? Or are you just enjoying the free champagne and brooding artists?" His voice, gruff and familiar, was a welcome anchor to reality. "He invited me to his studio, Miller," I said, rubbing a hand over my temples. "He's smart, and he's compelling. He talks about art, about justice, about the city's darkness. It's all very poetic, very philosophical." "Poetic and philosophical doesn't cut it, Sharma," Miller grumbled. "Does he sound like a guy who carves rose petals onto dead politicians?" "He sounds like a guy who could inspire someone to do it," I admitted, a sigh escaping me. "Or perhaps a guy who justifies it to himself. The thematic overlap is undeniable." "Just be careful, kid," Miller warned, a rare note of genuine concern in his voice. "He's a predator. Don't let him get under your skin." "I won't," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted. Julian Vance wasn't just a suspect. He was a puzzle, a labyrinth of contradictions, and I, Anya Sharma, was walking willingly into his maze. The delicate dance of deception had only just begun, and already I felt the first unsettling pull of its dangerous rhythm. The night closed in around me, the city's neon bleeding into my quiet room, reflecting in the steel blue eyes I now couldn't quite shake from my thought. The invitation, when it came, was a simple text message, devoid of the theatrical flourish I might have expected from Julian. "My studio, tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock. There's a piece I think you'll appreciate. And perhaps a bottle of something interesting." It was both casual and compelling, a subtle pull that acknowledged our previous conversation without overtly referencing the dark undertones. I felt a familiar thrill, a mixture of professional anticipation and something far more personal, something I refused to name. I spent the next day in a whirlwind of preparation, both mental and physical. I reviewed everything I had on Julian Vance, cross-referencing his public statements with the Confessor's known patterns. I practiced my Lena Thorne persona in front of the mirror, refining the subtle nuances of her smile, the thoughtful tilt of her head, the precise blend of admiration and intellectual curiosity that was her hallmark. This wasn't just a role, it was becoming a second skin, one that felt increasingly comfortable, dangerously so. At precisely 6 o'clock, I found myself standing before the wrought iron gates of Julian's studio, a converted industrial space tucked away in a cobblestone alley just beyond the fringe of the city's glittering financial district. The facade was imposing, almost fortress-like, its brickwork stained with decades of grime and rain. A single, unadorned buzzer was my only point of entry. I pressed it, the sound echoing in the sudden quiet of the alley. A moment later, a low resonant voice crackled through the intercom. "Lena, come in." The gate buzzed, swinging open with a groan of old metal. The interior was a revelation. Far from the pristine minimalist galleries, Julian's studio was a cavernous space, a cathedral of creation and chaos. Towering ceilings, crisscrossed with exposed beams, soared above a floor littered with tools, canvases, and the skeletal remains of past projects. Unfinished pieces, draped in muslin or standing starkly exposed, seemed to scream silent accusations from every corner, their forms hinting at profound torment and nascent beauty. The air was thick with the scent of clay, plaster, turpentine, and something else, something metallic and sharp that I couldn't quite place. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced the grimy skylights, illuminating the raw, visceral energy of the space. Julian emerged from the shadows at the far end of the studio, a long apron splattered with clay and paint covering his usual dark attire. His hands, perpetually stained, held a sculpting tool, a delicate, almost surgical instrument. "Lena, welcome. Forgive the mess. It's the nature of creation, I'm afraid. A controlled chaos." He gestured with the tool, a faint smile playing on his lips. "It's magnificent, Julian," I said, my voice genuinely awed. The sheer scale of his work, the raw power emanating from even the unfinished pieces, was breathtaking. "It's not chaos, it's a living testament to a mind constantly at work." "A kind assessment," he replied, laying the tool aside. "Though sometimes it feels more like a prison of my own making." He led me deeper into the studio, past towering figures that seemed to writhe in silent agony, past abstract forms that pulsed with an unsettling energy. "I wanted to show you this." He stopped before a draped form, taller than both of us, its contours hinting at a human figure but distorted, elongated. With a flourish, he pulled back the muslin. Beneath, a sculpture of breathtaking, terrifying beauty stood revealed. It was a figure undeniably human, but stretched, almost crucified, its limbs reaching towards an unseen tormentor. Its face was a mask of exquisite anguish, a single, perfectly sculpted tear falling from one eye, catching the light like a crystal. The piece was titled, in elegant script on a small plaque, "The Silent Lament." My breath hitched. The single, perfectly sculpted tear. It was the exact motif found on the Confessor's latest victim, the disgraced politician. The connection was irrefutable, chilling. My internal recorder, always running, began to hum with frantic energy. "It's powerful, Julian," I managed, my voice a little strained. I reached out, my fingers hovering inches from the cold, smooth surface of the tear. The raw emotion, it's almost unbearable. He watched me, his gaze intense. "It's meant to be. This piece was born from a profound loss, Lena, a tragedy that shaped everything I've become. It's a lament for those who are silenced, for those whose pain is ignored, for those who are judged before they are understood." His voice was low, laced with a raw vulnerability that surprised me. He spoke of a past shrouded in tragedy, hinting at a fierce, albeit twisted, sense of justice. My younger sister, Ilara, she was an artist too, vibrant, full of life. But she fell in with the wrong crowd, became entangled in a web of deceit and manipulation. She was betrayed, discarded, left to fend for herself by those who promised her the world. When she died, alone and unmourned by those who should have protected her, this piece began to form in my mind, a testament to her silent suffering, a judgment on those who failed her. He wasn't confessing to murder, not overtly, but he was confessing to a profound personal trauma, a wound that mirrored, in some twisted way, the themes of judgment and retribution seen in the Confessor's work. It was a raw, unexpected vulnerability, and it chipped away at the hardened shell I had built around my heart. It made him human, and in his humanity, he became infinitely more dangerous, more compelling. "I'm so sorry, Julian," I said, and the words, to my surprise, felt utterly sincere. A part of Anya, the part that remembered her own betrayals and losses, reached out to him. He looked away, his jaw tight. Sorry doesn't bring them back, does it? It doesn't absolve the guilty. He turned back to me, his eyes now holding a flicker of something close to anger. Justice, Lena, is rarely served by institutions. Sometimes it must be carved out by other means. Do you believe in an eye for an eye? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, pushing the boundary, trying to discern the line between artist and avenger. He considered this, his gaze distant. I believe in balance, in consequence. If the scales are tipped too far, someone, somewhere, will inevitably try to right them. Whether that is an act of justice or an act of vengeance, the distinction often lies in the eye of the beholder. Wouldn't you agree? The conversation shifted then, moving from the profound to the prosaic. He offered me a glass of amber liquid, a rare single malt, its smoky warmth, a surprising comfort in the cavernous studio. He spoke of his artistic process, of the struggle to translate internal landscapes into tangible forms. He showed me other pieces, some brutal, some ethereal, each bearing the undeniable stamp of his unique vision. As the evening deepened, a subtle hunger began to gnaw at me. I should let you get back to your work, Julian, I said, glancing at my watch. I've taken up enough of your time. He smiled, a genuine, disarming smile that softened the sharp angles of his face. Nonsense. My work will be here tomorrow. Besides, I find myself enjoying your company, Lena. Your insights are refreshing. And I confess, I'm rather hungry myself. I could whip up something simple in my apartment, if you're not averse to a home-cooked meal. The invitation to his apartment, another layer of infiltration, another step closer, a warm, intimate gesture that clashed violently with the cold facts of the case. I wouldn't want to impose, I demurred, playing the part of the polite guest. You wouldn't be, he insisted, his steel blue eyes holding mine. Consider it an extension of our conversation. Art, after all, is best discussed over good food and even better company. And so, I found myself in Julian Vance's apartment, just a few floors above my own in the labyrinthine. It was surprisingly minimalist, yet infused with a quiet elegance. Bookshelves lined an entire wall, overflowing with volumes on philosophy, art history, and psychology. A single large window overlooked the city, a shimmering tapestry of light spread out beneath us. He moved with a quiet efficiency in the kitchen, preparing a simple pasta dish with fresh herbs and olive oil, the aroma filling the apartment with a comforting warmth. So, Lena Thorne, he said, stirring the sauce, his back to me. Tell me about yourself. Beyond your discerning eye for art, what makes you tick? I recited my carefully crafted backstory. A former gallery owner, disillusioned by the commercialism of the art world, now seeking to reconnect with the pure essence of creation. I spoke of a failed relationship, a betrayal that had left me weary but not broken. It was a story designed to mirror his own vulnerabilities, to create a sense of shared experience, of understanding. He listened, his head tilted slightly, occasionally interjecting with a perceptive question. "So, you know what it feels like then, to have your trust broken? To be betrayed by someone you held dear?" "More than I care to admit," I confessed, allowing a genuine pang of old hurt to color my voice. "It leaves scars, doesn't it? And sometimes a burning desire for resolution." He turned, his eyes meeting mine across the gleaming kitchen counter. Resolution. Yes, a powerful word. Some seek it through forgiveness, others through other means. He held my gaze, a silent question hanging in the air. We ate at a small, round table overlooking the city, the lights twinkling like fallen stars. The food was simple, exquisite, and the conversation flowed easily, stretching into the early hours. We spoke of dreams, of regrets, of the inherent loneliness of the human condition. He'd look at me, truly look at me, with an intensity that made me question my own reflections. Was he seeing Lena Thorne, the art enthusiast? Or was he seeing Anya Sharma, the detective, stripped bare of her defenses? The line between persona and self blurred, becoming indistinguishable. His insights were startling, almost prescient. He seemed to anticipate my every move, my every unspoken thought. He spoke of the city's underbelly, of the forgotten souls who walked its streets, with an empathy that felt genuine. But then he would shift, his voice hardening, speaking of the inherent corruption, the rot at the core of society, and the need for a reckoning. It was a constant oscillation, a dance between light and shadow, and I found myself mesmerized, drawn deeper into his complex world. As the night wore on, the wine flowed, and the city lights blurred into a soft, inviting haze. He revealed another deeply personal detail, a memory of a time when his art was ridiculed, his vision dismissed by the very institutions he now challenged. They called it grotesque, depraved, he said, his voice laced with a quiet bitterness. They couldn't see beyond the discomfort, couldn't see the truth I was trying to expose. It made me realize that sometimes you have to force people to look, force them to confront what they'd rather ignore. His proximity to crime scenes, the precise timing of his inspiration coinciding with the discoveries in the shadowed alleys, remained a damning coincidence. His late-night calls, sometimes just a brief philosophical musing, sometimes a question about art, sometimes simply a silence, and his unexplained absences all fueled my dread, even as they fed a growing, unsettling fascination. The next day, back in the sterile confines of my own apartment, the cold precinct called. It was Miller, his voice a gravelly rumble over the secure line. "You're getting too close, Lena," he warned, his words cutting through the lingering haze of Julian's charm. "Ramon is asking questions. He says you're spending too much time playing art critic, not enough time hunting a killer." "I'm building rapport, Miller," I retorted, my voice sharper than I intended. "He's opening up. He's showing me things, telling me things. It's working." "Or he's playing you, kid," Miller shot back, his tone grim. "Don't let him get under your skin. Don't forget who he is, or who you are." I dismissed his concerns, of course. To him, it was a case, a suspect. To me, it was becoming something more. But in the quiet solitude of my apartment, I found myself replaying Julian's tender gestures, the way he'd offered me his coat when the studio grew cold, the gentle way he'd refilled my wine glass, the intense, protective glances he'd sometimes cast my way. I remembered his almost prescient understanding of my own unspoken thoughts, the way he seemed to intuit my deeper anxieties, my hidden vulnerabilities. It was unnerving, yes, but also deeply, undeniably connecting. The evidence against him was circumstantial, yet compelling. The single tear motif, the philosophical musings, the sheer intensity of his art, all pointed towards a man capable of such methodical symbolic violence. But my heart, once thought impervious, began to ache with a raw, undeniable connection. The lines blurred, not just between Anya and Lena, but between hunter and hunted, between justice and something far more complex. I was falling, not just into the depths of the case, but into the dangerous, captivating orbit of Julian Vance, and I wasn't sure I wanted to pull myself out. The city lights continued their silent bleed outside my window, and within me a different kind of bleed had begun, staining the edges of my resolve with shades of uncertainty and an unexpected, unsettling tendency. The city, a sprawling, indifferent behemoth, continued its relentless grind, oblivious to the fresh horror unfolding in its shadowed veins. The news broke like a shard of ice in the pre-dawn quiet, shattering the fragile peace of my meticulously ordered apartment. Another victim. Not just another, but times the times victim that twisted the knife in my gut, making the lines I was trying so desperately to draw between Julian and the Confessor snap and fray like old rope. They found him, Anya. Miller's voice, gravelly and grim, cut through the static on my secure line. Senator Thorne, disgraced politician, you remember the one, the pension fund scandal, found in the old industrial district near the abandoned docks. Posed, of course. My stomach clenched. The signature? Oh, it's a signature all right, he practically spat, a rare tremor of disgust in his tone. The most disturbing one yet. A single, perfectly sculpted tear, Anya. Just like the one from Vance's silent lament. Only this one was real. Frozen on his cheek, a macabre pearl. A cold dread seeped into my bones, chilling me far more than the city's damp morning air. The piece Julian had shown me in his studio, the one born from his profound loss, his sister's tragedy. The silent lament, a testament to her suffering, a judgment on those who failed her, and now a disgraced politician found with that exact, impossible motif. The connection was too precise, too chillingly familiar to be coincidence. It was irrefutable. It screamed Julian Vance. I hung up, the receiver feeling impossibly heavy in my hand, and stared out at the bruised twilight giving way to a bruised dawn. The city lights, usually a comfort, now seemed to mock me, their vibrant hues bleeding onto rain-slicked streets, reflecting my own internal chaos. Duty screamed betrayal. My heart, foolish and vulnerable, ached with a raw, undeniable connection to the man who had shown me his deepest wound. I knew what I had to do. I had to go back to his studio. I had to find something, anything, that would prove what my gut was now screaming. The studio visit he had granted me, the intimate dinner, the conversations that had stretched into the early hours, they were all part of his game, his calculated seduction. And I, Anya Sharma, the detective who prided herself on her impenetrable resolve, had walked right into it, letting him chip away at my certainty with his quiet intelligence and profound observations. Hours later, after a sleepless night spent replaying every interaction, every word, I found myself back at the wrought-iron gates of Julian's studio. The air was heavy with unspoken things, the scent of rain and old brick. I buzzed, and this time there was no crackle of his voice, no invitation. The gate simply clicked open, a subtle detail, but one that registered in my detective's mind. He knew I was coming. He was expecting me. The studio was quiet, eerily so. The usual cacophony of tools and creative chaos was absent. replaced by a stillness that felt pregnant with anticipation. The sculpture, the silent lament, stood draped in its muslin shroud, a silent sentinel guarding its terrible secret. I moved through the vast space, my footsteps echoing unnervingly. My eyes scanned every surface, every shadow, searching for the hidden detail. I wasn't looking for a smoking gun. I was looking for a sketchbook. A place where an artist, obsessed with his themes, would undoubtedly document his inspirations, his macabre musings. I found it tucked away on a dusty shelf, partially obscured by a stack of canvases. A leather-bound sketchbook, its pages worn and dog-eared. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled it out, my fingers trembling slightly. This was it. This was the moment. I flipped through the pages, my breath catching in my throat. Charcoal sketches, vibrant watercolors, intricate pen and ink drawings, each one a window into Julian's mind, a breathtaking display of his genius. And then I saw them. A series of rough sketches, raw and unfinished, depicting the very pose of Senator Thorne, the angle of the head, the twist of the body, the placement of the solitary tear. It was all there, chillingly precise. An earlier, unpublished series, just as Miller had described. There were even annotations in Julian's elegant script, philosophical musings about the nature of abuse of power, the decay of justice, the unbearable weight of consequence for those who preyed on the vulnerable. The evidence was irrefutable. My mind raced, calculating the angles, the timing, the sequence of events. This wasn't just thematic overlap. This was a blueprint, a confession in charcoal and ink. Julian Vance was the confessor. The thought landed with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. The man who had looked into my eyes and spoken of shared pain, of past betrayals, of a sister's tragic loss, was a cold-blooded killer. You found it. His voice, low and resonant, cut through the silence, making me jump. I spun around, the sketchbook clutched in my hand like a shield. Julian stood in the archway leading to his living quarters, his silhouette framed against the softer light of his apartment. He was no longer wearing his paint-splattered apron, but a simple dark shirt and trousers, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. His eyes, usually so intense, now held a profound sadness, a weary resignation that pierced through my anger. "You knew I'd come," I whispered, my voice thick with a mixture of accusation and a strange aching disappointment. He nodded slowly, stepping into the studio, the light catching the silver strands in his dark hair. "I did. You're too good, Anya, too driven, too honest beneath all the layers you wear." He paused, his gaze sweeping over me, lingering on the sketchbook in my hand. "You're not Lena Thorne, are you, Detective Sharma?" The mask shattered. The carefully constructed persona I had nurtured, the one I had almost begun to believe in myself, crumbled into dust. The air crackled with the raw truth of his words. He had known, all along. The realization hit me with another wave of nausea. Every tender gesture, every intimate conversation, every shared vulnerability, it had all been a performance for him too. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely a tremor. "From the moment you walked into the gallery," he admitted, a faint, melancholic smile touching his lips. "Your eyes, detective, they don't lie. They hold too much fire, too much history for a mere art enthusiast. And your questions, they were always a little too precise, a little too penetrating. You're a hunter, Anya, and a very beautiful one." His words, meant to disarm, only fueled my anger. "And you're a killer, Julian. A monster who twists art into justification for murder." I held up the sketchbook, its pages open to the damning drawings. This is irrefutable, Senator Thorne. The tear, it's all here. He looked at the sketchbook, then back at me, his gaze unwavering. Yes, it is, but it's not what you think. Don't insult my intelligence, I snapped, my voice rising. It's a blueprint. It's your confession. Is it? He challenged, his voice remaining calm, almost gentle, a stark contrast to my rising fury. Or is it an artist's exploration of a theme, a dark fascination with the very ugliness he seeks to expose? You, of all people, detective, should understand the allure of the shadows, the desire to understand the monster. He took a step closer, and I instinctively took a step back, my hand instinctively going to the small of my back, where my service weapon would have been, if I hadn't been undercover. He noticed the gesture, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. You carry your own darkness, Anya, he said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper, as if he could peel back the layers of my soul with his words. The past case that haunts you, the betrayal that hardened you, the one that left you with that scar, not just on your face, but on your heart. I saw it, Lena. I saw the cracks in your armor, the yearning for connection you rarely allowed yourself to acknowledge. You're not so different from me in that regard. We both seek to understand the wounds that fester beneath the surface. His words hit me with an unexpected force, a brutal honesty that stripped away my defenses. He saw me, truly saw me, not just Lena Thorne, but Anya Sharma, with all her scars and vulnerabilities. It was unnerving, terrifying, and profoundly unsettling. Don't try to turn this on me, I retorted, my voice trembling slightly. My darkness is not a justification for murder, nor is mine, he replied, his gaze unwavering. I vehemently deny being the confessor, Anya, but I admit to observing the city's underbelly, to understanding the killer's motivations, perhaps even more intimately than you can imagine. He paused, his eyes searching mine. I offer to help you, Anya, not as a suspect, but as an ally. I have insights you couldn't possibly possess. Insights into the mind that created these tableaux. My gut twisted. Was this a genuine plea for help? A desperate cry from a damaged soul? Or was it another layer of his elaborate deception? A master manipulator attempting to draw me deeper into his web? The lines blurred irrevocably, an agonizing knot of duty and a burgeoning, foolish vulnerability. He turned, walking towards a large, unfinished sculpture draped near the back wall. You want proof that I'm not the confessor? Or proof that I'm more than just a detached observer? He pulled back a section of the canvas, revealing a hidden compartment built into the base of the sculpture. Inside, neatly stacked, was a cache of newspaper clippings about the confessor's victims. Each one was meticulously annotated, not just with dates and locations, but with psychological profiles, philosophical musings, and theories about the killer's evolving methods. There were diagrams, maps of the shadowed alleys with potential escape routes and observation points circled. It was a forensic goldmine, a killer's diary, or a profiler's obsession. I wasn't just observing Anya, he said, his voice quiet, almost mournful. I was studying him, trying to understand him, trying to understand a part of myself, perhaps. The part that resonates with the anger, the frustration, the desire for a twisted form of justice. I've been trying to stop him in my own way, to anticipate his moves, to understand the philosophy he's perverted. I stared at the clippings, my mind reeling. The sheer volume of information, the depth of his analysis, it was staggering. He wasn't just a suspect, he was an expert. An unwilling, perhaps, but undeniably brilliant expert on the Confessor. Was this his confession in disguise? Or a desperate plea for help? A cry from a damaged soul caught in a terrible self-made trap? My duty screamed betrayal, urging me to arrest him then and there, to bring him in, to present this damning yet strangely exculpatory evidence to the precinct. But my heart, foolish and vulnerable, began to believe him. The way he spoke of his sister, the raw pain in his eyes, the almost palpable sense of being haunted, it resonated with my own buried wounds. He wasn't just playing me, he was inviting me into his darkness, into a shared understanding of the city's festering underbelly. Why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, my eyes still fixed on the annotated clippings. Why not go to the police? Why not expose him? He turned, his gaze meeting mine, a profound sadness in their depths. And say what, Anya? That I, the artist whose work so eerily mirrors the killer's methods, have been secretly tracking him? That my philosophical musings about societal decay have somehow inspired him? Do you truly believe they would see me as an ally and not as an accomplice? My reputation, my art, my very sanity, it would be shattered, and who would believe me? He gestured around the studio, at the looming sculptures, the dark, unsettling beauty that was his life's work. My art is already seen through a macabre lens. This would be the final condemnation. He was right. The media, the public, even my own colleagues, they would tear him apart. He was too close, too perfect a suspect. His silence, his attempts to understand, would be twisted into complicity. So you've been hunting him, alone, I murmured, the pieces slowly, terrifyingly, falling into place. Trying to stop him without implicating yourself. Trying to understand him, he corrected softly. And yes, to stop him, before he goes too far, before he corrupts everything I believe in. My art is meant to provoke thought, Anya, not to justify murder. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out, almost touching my arm, then hesitating. We can do this together, Anya. You have the official channels, the resources. I have the insights, the understanding of his mind. We can find him. The times, real times, Confessor. The proposition hung in the air, a dangerous, tempting offer. A partnership forged in shadows, built on a foundation of deception and a shared understanding of humanity's darker impulses. My duty screamed betrayal. My heart, foolish and vulnerable, began to believe him. The lines had blurred irrevocably. I was no longer just chasing a killer. I was standing at a crossroads with Julian Vance, the enigmatic artist, the suspected killer, the man who saw into my soul, offering me his hand, inviting me to walk deeper into the darkness with him. The city lights continued to bleed, and I, Anya Sharma, felt a terrifying, exhilarating pull towards the abyss. The city, an ever-present, watchful eye, seemed to hold its breath as I stepped deeper into the dance. Julian's revelation, his cache of annotated clippings, his raw, aching story of a sister's betrayal and a distorted legacy had twisted my gut into a knot of moral ambiguity. My duty screamed betrayal, a shrill, insistent siren in the back of my mind, but my heart, foolish and vulnerable, swayed precariously, teetering on the precipice of belief. He had seen past Lena Thorne, past Anya Sharma, into the haunted landscape of my soul, and that shared darkness, that unexpected intimacy, was a potent, dangerous drug. So, I devised a desperate plan, a high-stakes gamble with my career, my life, and what remained of my emotional equilibrium. I would feign complete trust, allowing Julian to guide me, hoping that in his earnest desire to prove his innocence, he would either lead me to the true confessor or, in a moment of unwitting candor, expose himself fully. It was a tightrope walk over a chasm of my own making, with every step a potential plummet into professional ruin or personal devastation. So, what now, Professor Vance? I asked, my voice carefully neutral, as we stood amidst the silent accusations of his studio, the hidden compartment still open, its contents a stark testament to his morbid obsession. I watched him, searching for any tell, any flicker of deceit in those piercing steel-blue eyes. He turned, a faint, weary smile touching his lips. Now, Detective Sharma, we hunt. But not with badges and warrants, not yet. We hunt with understanding, with empathy for the darkness that drives men to this precipice. You have the official channels, the resources. I have the insights, the understanding of his mind. We must think like him, anticipate his next move, before he carves another judgment onto this city's bruised skin. And you believe this, disciple, is truly separate from you? I pressed, my gaze unwavering. That your philosophy hasn't simply given him a sophisticated language for his own madness. He walked over to the silent lament, running a hand over the cold, smooth surface of the sculpted tear. Every artist hopes their work inspires, Anya, but one cannot control the interpretations, the distortions. My art is a mirror, not a weapon. This protégé, this ghost, he has taken my observations on societal decay, my lament for the forgotten, and twisted them into a perverted form of justice. He sees himself as my instrument, my avenging angel, enacting the very judgments I merely articulate. He paused, his voice dropping to a low, almost mournful tone. I knew his mind, Anya. I saw the fragility, the obsessive nature. I tried to guide him, to temper his zeal. But some seeds, once planted, grow wild and uncontrollable. Over the next few days, our partnership became a strange clandestine ballet. Julian, seemingly eager to prove his innocence, led me through the city's grimmier corners, places I, as a detective, knew intimately, but saw through his eyes with a disturbing new clarity. He pointed out patterns in the confessor's choices of victims, obscure symbols etched into forgotten brickwork near crime scenes, potential hideouts known only to those intimately familiar with the city's hidden depths. Look here, he'd say, pointing to a mural depicting a fallen angel, its wings clipped, its face a mask of despair. The confessor left a single black feather beside the last victim, not just a token, but a symbol, a lament for a purity lost, a judgment on those who clipped the wings of others. This protégé, he was obsessed with fallen angels, with the idea of redemption through suffering. He saw himself as one of them. We spent hours in whispering cafes, the scent of espresso and old books mingling with the rain, streaked light filtering through the windows. He'd sketch furiously in his notebook, his long, elegant fingers moving with a dancer's grace, illustrating his theories. He spoke of the protégé, a disturbed young artist named Luca Rain, who had idolized Julian's work and twisted his philosophy into a justification for murder. Luca was brilliant, Anya. Julian confided one afternoon, stirring his black coffee, his eyes distant. He had a raw talent, an almost terrifying intensity. But he was fragile too, abandoned as a child, haunted by unseen demons. He saw in my art not a reflection of society's ills, but a divine mandate for retribution. He believed he was purifying the city, one judgment at a time, echoing my themes, using my aesthetic, but with a terrifying, literal interpretation. And you never suspected he would act on it? I asked, trying to keep my voice even, though a chill ran down my spine. He looked at me, a flicker of profound sadness in his eyes. I saw his darkness, yes. I tried to temper it, to channel it into his art. But I never imagined, I never truly believed he would cross that line. Not until the first Confessor victim, the one with the broken scales of justice. It was a piece I had sketched years ago, an unpublished concept. Only Luca knew of it. He described Luca's unique artistic signature, a specific way he layered paint, a particular angle he favored for his macabre poses. He even showed me a coded message, an obscure symbol Luca had incorporated into his own, less renowned works, a symbol Julian now recognized in the Confessor's recent tableau. He had been trying to stop Luca, he claimed, to understand him, to warn the victims in his own twisted way. He had been so close, he said, so desperate to end it without involving me, without implicating himself in the public eye. Meanwhile, the precinct, fed up with my lack of progress and increasingly suspicious of my closeness to Vance, grew restless. Ramon's impatience was a palpable force even through the phone. "Anya, what the hell is going on?" Ramon's voice boomed through the secure line one evening, cutting through the quiet hum of my apartment. "Miller's been covering for you, but my patience is wearing thin. We've got a serial killer terrorizing the city, and you're off having philosophical debates with our prime suspect. The media is circling like vultures, and the mayor is breathing down my neck. I need results, Sharma, not art critiques. I'm getting results, Chief." I countered, my voice tight. "I'm deeper than anyone has ever been. I'm close." "Close isn't good enough," he snapped. "You bring him in, Anya. Within 24 hours, or you're off the case, and there will be consequences. For both of us." The line went dead, leaving me with a cold, hollow feeling in my chest. My time was running out. I knew what I had to do. The plan, always lurking in the back of my mind, now solidified. I arranged a meeting with Julian at a secluded rooftop bar, the Zenith, its name a cruel irony given the precipice I was on. The city lights shimmered below like fallen stars, a breathtaking, deceptive panorama. I wore a wire, a tiny, almost invisible device nestled beneath the collar of my dress. Miller and a tactical team were waiting nearby, their positions carefully staked out, ready to move in on my signal. I planned to push him, to force a confession, to get him to admit to everything, one way or another. The bar was sleek, minimalist, with soft jazz playing in the background, a stark contrast to the drama unfolding. Julian was already there, nursing a glass of amber liquid, his gaze fixed on the cityscape. He turned as I approached, a familiar, enigmatic smile touching his lips. "Lena," he greeted, his voice a low hum. "You look stunning, like a dark star against the city's sprawl." "Julian," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, my heart hammering against the wire beneath my dress. "Thank you for meeting me." We ordered drinks, and for a few moments the conversation was light, an easy banter that belied the monumental tension thrumming between us. He spoke of a new inspiration, a nascent idea for a sculpture born from the unique light of the city at dusk. I listened, nodding, my mind racing, trying to find the opening, the right moment to strike. Then he turned, his steel blue eyes locking onto mine, the intensity I had come to both dread and crave burning brightly. "Lena," he began, his voice dropping, becoming raw, stripped of its usual layers of artifice. Anya, I need to tell you something I haven't dared to articulate, even to myself, until now. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't the confession I was expecting. From the moment I saw you, he continued, his gaze unwavering, I felt it, a connection, a resonance. You saw my art, truly saw it, not just the surface, but the pain, the truth beneath. And you carry your own pain, your own truth. I've seen it in your eyes, in the way you carry yourself. You're haunted, just like me. And I've fallen in love with you, Anya. The words hung in the air, shattering my composure, tearing through the carefully constructed walls of Lena Thorne, of Detective Sharma. A raw, aching admission that landed like a physical blow. He loved me? The man I was trying to trap, the man I suspected of being a killer, the man who had seen through my disguise from the very beginning. I know it's madness, he went on, his voice thick with emotion, given the circumstances, given who we are, what we're doing. But I've never met anyone like you, Anya. You understand the darkness, you're not afraid of it. You see past the artifice, past the masks we all wear. I want to protect you from this, from the rot, from the ugliness that consumes us both. I want to be with you truly, honestly, without the shadows. My mind reeled. Love, betrayal, duty. The words blurred, became meaningless. I could feel the wire pressing against my skin, a cold, hard reminder of the truth. Miller and the team were listening. They were hearing this. Julian, I managed, my voice a shaky whisper. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know who I am. Oh, I know exactly who you are. Anya Sharma. He contradicted softly, his thumb gently tracing the back of my hand. A gesture of profound intimacy. And I know who I am, and I know what I've done, and what I haven't, and what I haven't done. Is kill those people, but I know who has, and I know why. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near inaudible whisper, audible only to me and, presumably, the listening devices. Luca Rain, my former protégé. He's the Confessor, Anya. He took my philosophy, my art, and twisted it into something monstrous. He believes he's completing my work, exacting the judgments I only dared to conceptualize. He pulled a small folded piece of paper from his inner jacket pocket, placing it discreetly on the table between us. This is the coded message, the one he uses to sign his masterpieces. It's a unique artistic signature, a symbol only I would recognize. And this, he said, tapping a specific location marked on the paper, is where he's planning his next tableau. A derelict warehouse, a forgotten monument to the city's industrial past, a place he always spoke of as a canvas for his grandest vision. He's planning it now, Anya, tonight. He's going to recreate my early, most disturbing sculpture, The Unforgiven, with a live victim. A disgraced judge, I believe, who sent an innocent man to prison years ago. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, earnest. I've been trying to protect you, Anya. I've been hunting him myself, trying to stop him, to spare you the pain of confronting such a monster. I've been so close, so desperate to end it without involving you, without implicating myself in the public eye. But he's moved up his timeline. He's going to strike tonight. You have to believe me. This is the truth. My mind raced. The coded message, the unique artistic signature, the specific location, the new victim, it all clicked into place with a terrifying, undeniable logic. It was too precise, too detailed to be a lie. It was irrefutable evidence, not against Julian, but against Luca rain. Just then, a voice crackled in my ear, Miller's gravelly tone, urgent, demanding. "We've got it, Lena. The location, the name. Ramon's already authorizing the raid. We're moving in." I looked at Julian, my heart a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. He had played me, yes, but not to escape. He had played me to save me, to give me the truth, to spare me the impossible choice of arresting the man I had come to love. He knew I would never truly believe him until I saw the real killer, until the evidence was undeniable, irrefutable, coming from his own lips, in a moment of desperate honesty. His eyes, usually so enigmatic, now held a profound sadness. He saw the glint of the wire, barely visible beneath my collar, now that I was leaning forward. He saw the betrayal in my eyes, the dawning realization of the trap I had set, and the truth he had offered in its place. He knew, he had known all along, and he had chosen to expose the real killer, even if it meant exposing himself to my initial crushing disbelief. His sacrifice, his desperate plea for my belief, hung heavy in the air between us. The tactical team was moving in, not for him, but for the protégé, based on the information he had just confessed. The city lights continued to bleed, and I, Anya Sharma, was left with a love born in shadows, forged in deceit, and now irrevocably stained by the terrible truth. The city, a sprawling, indifferent beast, had never felt so utterly, terrifyingly alive. After Julian's whispered confession on the rooftop, after Miller's crackling voice in my ear confirming the imminent raid, a primal instinct had taken over, overriding every protocol, every ounce of rational thought. I had abandoned my team, leaving Miller barking into his comms, a frantic echo of my own internal chaos. The address Julian had scribbled, the one for the derelict warehouse, burned in my mind like a brand. It was a desperate gamble, a headlong plunge into the unknown, betting everything on the sincerity of a man I had been sent to ensnare. The neon signs, like open wounds, bled their vibrant hues onto the rain-slicked streets as I hailed a cab. The city, a blur of distorted color and anxious possibility. Each street lamp that flashed by felt like a heartbeat, accelerating, pushing me closer to a truth that promised to either vindicate or utterly destroy me. The warehouse district was a forgotten monument to the city's industrial past, a graveyard of ambition and decay. Rusting metal skeletons reached towards the bruised twilight, their corrugated iron skins rattling in the wind. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp concrete, forgotten dreams, and something else, a faint metallic tang that raised the hairs on my arms. My cab driver, a grizzled man who looked like he'd seen too many city nights, eyed the address with a wary glance. "Not many folks go out here this late, lady. Not unless they're looking for trouble." "Just drop me at the corner," I said, my voice tight, my hand already reaching for my wallet. "It's fine." He grunted, pulling over, and I was out of the cab before it fully stopped, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The warehouse Julian had described loomed before me, a hulking, silent beast, its grimy windows staring out like blind eyes. A single, weak bulb flickered above a rusting loading dock door, casting long, grotesque shadows that danced and swayed in the wind. I moved with the stealth of a seasoned hunter, every sense heightened, every nerve alive. The rain had picked up, a soft, persistent drizzle that dampened my hair and plastered my clothes to my skin, yet I barely noticed. My mind was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The cold, calculating logic of the detective, the burgeoning, terrifying hope of the woman who had dared to love a suspected killer, and the chilling dread of what I might find within those dark walls. The loading dock door was ajar, a sliver of yellow light escaping into the night. My hand instinctively went to the small, concealed pistol I now carried, a concession to the dangers of this path, a stark contrast to the persona of Lena Thorne. I pushed the door open slowly, a groan of tortured metal echoing through the vast, empty space. The sight that greeted me froze me in place, a tableau of horrifying beauty, a macabre masterpiece sprung to life. The warehouse was enormous, its cavernous interior illuminated by a series of strategically placed, harsh spotlights that cast long, dramatic shadows. In the center, on a raised platform, was the chilling recreation of one of Julian's early, most disturbing sculptures, the Unforgiven, the original, a dark, abstract piece of twisted metal and jagged edges, was meant to evoke the agony of unjust condemnation. Here, however, it was given a terrifying, literal interpretation. A man, bound and gagged, hung suspended from a crude gallows, his face contorted in terror, his eyes wide with a desperate, silent plea. His body was artfully arranged, draped in tattered fabric, his pose mimicking the tormented figures in Julian's early sketches. He was a disgraced judge, the one Julian had mentioned, whose past transgressions had sent an innocent man to prison. The air was thick with the metallic scent I had noticed earlier, the coppery tang of fear and something else, something I couldn't yet identify. And then I saw them. Julian stood facing the gallows, his back to me, his stance rigid, his head bowed. He was speaking, his voice low, resonant, but I couldn't make out the words. Opposite him, sketching furiously on a large canvas propped on an easel, was Luca Rain. He was gaunt, wild-eyed, his dirty blonde hair hanging in uneven tufts, his face hollowed by sleepless nights and obsession. He wore paint-stained jeans and a threadbare cardigan, the rings on his trembling fingers glinting in the harsh light. His movements were jerky, manic, a frightening mirror of artistic fervor gone terribly, tragically wrong. His eyes, when they darted from the bound victim to his canvas, held a terrifying gleam of righteous madness. Luca Rain, the Confessor. The realization landed with a cold, hard certainty. He was exactly as Julian had described, brilliant, volatile, dangerously unbalanced. "You've gone too far, Luca." Julian's voice cut through the silence, filled with a mix of horror and profound sadness. "This is not art. This is not justice. This is a perversion of everything I ever taught you, everything I ever believed in." Luca paused, his charcoal poised above the canvas, his head cocked to one side like a bird of prey. "Perversion? No, master. This is the ultimate expression. This is the truth you dared to conceptualize, brought to its glorious, agonizing fruition. You showed me the wounds of the city, the hypocrisy, the rot. You gave me the language, the aesthetic. And I, your most devoted disciple, am merely completing your work." He gestured wildly at the bound judge. He condemned the innocent. He walked free while others suffered. This is his consequence. This is his judgment. This is art. This is murder, Luca. Julian's voice rose, his hands clenched into fists. "You twist my words. You distort my meaning. My art is meant to provoke thought, to challenge, to expose, not to destroy, not to become the very thing it condemns. But you understand, don't you, master?" Luca's eyes, wide and feverish, darted between Julian and the victim. "You understand the necessity, the purity of it, the cleansing fire. You wrote of the unbearable weight of consequence, of the silent lament of the discarded. I simply gave it form. I am your hand, master, your instrument. It was then that Luca's wild eyes swept across the vast space, and he saw me, Anya Sharma, standing in the shadows, my presence an unwelcome intrusion. Recognition, then a flash of pure, unadulterated rage contorted his features. You? He shrieked, his voice cracking, high-pitched, shattering the theatrical calm of the scene. You brought her. You betrayed me, master. You brought the authorities into our sacred space. He dropped his charcoal, a clatter echoing through the warehouse, and lunged at Julian. In his hand, glinting wickedly in the harsh spotlight, was a sharpened sculpting tool, a weapon crafted for precision, now wielded for murder. It was long, slender, with a viciously pointed tip, designed to carve and shape, but capable of piercing flesh with terrifying ease. My detective instincts screamed, overriding the shock, overriding the fear. I reacted without thought, a blur of motion. Julian, look out! I cried, pushing him violently out of the way, sending him sprawling to the concrete floor. Luca, his momentum unchecked, stumbled, his eyes now fixed on me, burning with a fresh, furious hatred. You, the detective? You seek to deny the truth, to protect the unjust. He swung the sculpting tool in a wild, arcing motion. I dodged, the sharp tip whistling past my ear, a fraction of an inch from my temple. The brutal struggle began. Luca was surprisingly strong, fueled by fanaticism and a desperate, manic rage. He moved with an unpredictable, almost feral energy, his gaunt frame belying a coiled strength. He was no trained fighter, but his desperation made him dangerous, his attacks wild and relentless. Stop, Luca. This isn't the way, I yelled, trying to reason with him, trying to buy time, trying to find an opening. But his eyes were glazed, beyond reason, beyond hearing. He lunged again, the sculpting tool flashing, aiming for my gut. I twisted, taking the blow on my arm, a searing pain blooming as the sharp tip grazed my flesh, tearing through my coat and skin. Blood welled, warm and sticky, but I ignored it, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I struck back, a swift, practiced jab to his jaw, but he barely flinched, his eyes still burning with that terrifying zealotry. He pressed his advantage, pushing me back against a stack of discarded crates, his face inches from mine, his breath hot and fetid. You don't understand. You never will. We are creating something new, a purified world, and you are merely an obstacle. He raised the tool high, his arm trembling with effort, about to deliver a fatal blow, his eyes gleaming with the triumph of a madman. Just as the world seemed to narrow to that single, gleaming point, a guttural cry ripped through the cavernous space. No, Julian. He had been momentarily stunned, his head hitting the concrete hard when I'd pushed him. But now he was on his feet, his eyes wide with horror, a primal fury etched on his face. He grabbed a heavy, unfinished sculpture base, a solid block of concrete and rebar, its weight immense, designed to anchor a towering piece of art. With a desperate, almost superhuman effort, he swung it, a wild, raw arc of raw power. The blow connected with a sickening thud. Luca, mid-lunge, mid-strike, froze, his eyes wide, then crumpled, falling to the concrete floor with a heavy, lifeless thud. The sculpting tool clattered from his grasp, spinning across the floor, coming to rest near my feet. A dark stain began to spread on the concrete beneath him, a stark, brutal contrast to the artistic beauty he had tried to create. The warehouse fell silent, save for the ragged breathing of Anya and Julian, and the whimpering of the terrified victim still suspended from the gallows. The harsh spotlights, once illuminating a scene of chilling artistry, now cast a stark, brutal light on the aftermath of violence. I stared at Julian, my arm throbbing, my breath coming in ragged gasps. His hands, usually so elegant, so precise, were now stained with the dark, wet act he had committed to save my life. His chest heaved, his hair disheveled, his face pale and streaked with dust and grime. His eyes, usually so enigmatic, so controlled, were now filled with a raw, agonizing pain, a profound sorrow that seemed to consume him. He looked at me, a silent question hanging in the air, a question that transcended words, transcended the blood and the horror and the shattered wreckage of our mission. Asterisk. Do you believe me now? Do you still love me? Asterisk. The victim, still whimpering, was safe. The killer, Luca Rain, was stopped. But the cost was immeasurable. My mind raced, a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. Julian killed the protégé. Self-defense? Or an act of cold, calculated justice? A final, brutal judgment on the monster he had inadvertently created? The truth, as Julian had warned, was far more complex and personal than I could have ever imagined. I had found my monster, but in doing so, I had witnessed the monster within the man I loved, the man who had laid bare his soul and then his hands, stained with the blood of his disciple, to save me. And perhaps, in the chilling reflection of his desperate act, I saw a flicker of that same darkness within myself, a willingness to cross lines, to break rules, to risk everything for a truth that was now irrevocably stained. The city lights continued their silent bleed outside, and within me, a new, profound darkness had taken root. The piercing wail of sirens, once a distant, mournful cry in the city's symphony of night, now converged on the derelict warehouse, a crescendo of urgent sound that ripped through the stunned silence. Headlights swept across the cavernous space, cutting through the lingering dust motes, exposing the raw, brutal reality of what had just transpired. The precinct swarmed, a flurry of uniforms, flashing lights, and grim-faced detectives, transforming the macabre tableau into a meticulously documented crime scene. The air, still thick with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid scent of fear, quickly became saturated with the sterile efficiency of forensic teams. I stood over the prone form of Luca Rain, the sculpting tool lying discarded near his outstretched hand, its sharp tip now dulled by the concrete. Julian, his chest still heaving, his face etched with a profound, almost spiritual exhaustion, remained beside me, his hand still stained with the act he'd committed to save my life. The terrified victim, a man now reduced to a shivering, whimpering bundle of nerves, was gently cut down from his horrifying perch by a uniformed officer. His eyes, wide and unfocused, darted between Julian and me, then landed on Luca's motionless body, a shudder racking his frame. Miller was the first to reach us, his broad shoulders cutting through the chaos. His eyes, usually sharp and critical, softened as they took in my bloodied arm, the raw emotion on Julian's face, and the still form of the confessor. He didn't say anything at first, just gave a slow, weary nod, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible tightrope I had walked. He knew. He always knew, even when I tried to convince myself otherwise. "You all right, kid?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, his gaze sweeping over me. I nodded, pressing a hand to my throbbing arm. "He saved my life, Miller. Luca, he was going to kill me." Miller's eyes flickered to Julian, then back to me. He didn't press, didn't question, just a knowing, weary look that spoke volumes. He understood the weight I now carried, the tangled threads of truth and deception that bound me to this moment. Ramon's on his way. He's going to want a full statement from both of you. He gestured to Julian. He'll be taken in for questioning. Standard procedure. Julian met my gaze, a silent question hanging in the air. Asterisk. Do you believe me now? Do you still love me? Asterisk. I couldn't answer. Not then. Not with the chaos swirling around us. Not with the cold reality of his hands, still stained, still capable. I'll go with him, I said, my voice hoarse. I need to make sure his statement is accurate. Miller gave another slow nod. Just be careful, Anya. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. The ride back to the precinct was a blur of flashing lights and muted conversation. Julian was handcuffed but treated with a strange deference, an acknowledgement of the extraordinary circumstances. He sat in the back of the squad car, silent, his gaze fixed on the city lights bleeding into the rain-slicked streets, a ghost amidst the living. At the cold precinct, the fluorescent lights felt harsher, colder than usual, illuminating every crack in the facade I was desperately trying to maintain. Julian was led to an interrogation room, and I was taken to a separate office. I sat across from Ramon, his face a mask of grim satisfaction and barely concealed fury. So, you found him, Ramon stated, rather than asked, his eyes drilling into mine. The Confessor, and our prime suspect, Julian Vance, killed him. Convenient. It wasn't convenient, Chief, I countered, my voice steady, though my arm ached, a dull throb reminding me of Luca's desperate rage. It was self-defense. Luca Rain attacked me. Julian intervened, saving my life. I launched into my carefully constructed narrative, a precise, professional account of the events, omitting nothing factual, but framing everything through the lens of Julian's heroic intervention. I spoke of Luca's fanaticism, his twisted interpretation of Julian's art, the coded message, the planned tableau. My words were chosen with surgical precision, protecting Julian as much as possible, painting him as a reluctant hero, a man driven to desperate measures to stop the monster he had inadvertently inspired. Ramon listened, his expression unreadable, occasionally interjecting with a sharp, probing question. And Vance knew about Luca all along, was tracking him? Why didn't he come to us? He explained it, Chief, I said, meeting his gaze. He feared his own reputation, his art, would be irrevocably stained. He knew the public and even the department would have seen him as complicit given the thematic overlap in his work and the Confessor's methods. He was trying to stop Luca, to clean up his own mess without destroying his life in the process. He brought me in because he needed someone who understood the nuances, someone who could see beyond the easy accusations. Ramon leaned back, a sigh escaping him. It's a hell of a story, Sharma, a hero artist saving the day. The media's going to eat it alive. He looked at me, a flicker of something close to pride, then suspicion in his eyes. You did good, Anya. You got the Confessor. But don't think I don't see what's happening here. Don't think I don't see how close you got. I did my job, Chief, I said, my voice firm. I got results. You got results, all right, he grumbled, shaking his head. Now go get that arm looked at, and then get some rest. You've earned it. But rest was a luxury I couldn't afford. The news broke like a dam, a torrent of sensational headlines. Confessor caught, killed by artist he inspired. Detective Sharma, hero of the city. Julian Vance, artist or accomplice. Julian's arrest and the subsequent trial became a media circus, a feeding frenzy of speculation and half-truths. The city was relieved, the Confessor was dead, but the public was fascinated by the artist who killed his fanatical follower. Anya Sharma, now lauded as a hero, found herself suffocating under the praise, feeling utterly undeserving. Every compliment, every congratulatory handshake felt like a fresh wound, a reminder of the compromises I had made, the lines I had crossed. Weeks later, the trial began, a spectacle of legal maneuvering and public outrage. Julian, composed and enigmatic, sat through it all, his presence commanding, even from the defendant's table. I visited him in jail, our conversations strained, heavy with unspoken truths, and the raw emotional aftermath of the climax. The sterile visiting room, separated by a thick pane of glass, felt like a metaphor for the chasm that had opened between us. "They're painting me as a monster, Anya," he said one afternoon, his voice devoid of its usual resonance, flattened by the confines of his captivity, a modern-day Frankenstein, creating his own destruction. "You saved my life, Julian," I reminded him, my hand pressing against the glass, an impotent gesture of connection. "That's what matters." He met my gaze, his steel blue eyes holding a familiar intensity, but now tinged with a deep weariness. "And for that I am grateful. But the narrative, it's a powerful thing. The public needs a villain and a hero. They got their villain in Luca, and you, my dear detective, are their hero. I am merely the complicated shadow in between." He maintained his innocence regarding the Confessor killings, and despite everything, despite the lingering doubts, the logical impossibilities, I believed him. There was a raw honesty in his confession of love, a profound vulnerability in his admission of fear for his own art, his own sanity. "You manipulated me," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "You knew I was a detective from the beginning. You orchestrated everything." He nodded slowly, a faint, melancholic smile touching his lips. "I did. I admit it. I manipulated you, Anya. I orchestrated events to expose Luca without implicating myself directly. It was a desperate attempt to protect my reputation, my art, and perhaps my sanity. I knew the moment I saw you, you were the key. You had the drive, the intelligence, and a certain resonance with the shadows I inhabit." He paused, his gaze searching mine. "But my feelings for you, Anya, they were never part of the manipulation. They were real, are real. A love born in shadows, forged in blood, yes, but no less true for it. My own feelings were a tempest, a maelstrom of love, betrayal, and a crushing sense of moral ambiguity. How could I reconcile the tenderness he had shown me, the profound understanding he had offered, with the calculated deception he had wielded? How could I love a man who had used me as a pawn, even if his ultimate goal was to expose a killer and save my life? "It's complicated, Julian," I whispered, the words barely audible. "Life often is, Anya," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Especially when you dare to look beyond the surface, beyond the easy answers. We are both creatures of complexity, aren't we? Drawn to the truth, however ugly, however inconvenient." The trial continued, a grueling process of testimonies and cross-examinations. My testimony, carefully constructed and delivered with unwavering conviction, was crucial. I described the attack, Luca's desperate rage, Julian's swift and decisive action to save me. I painted a picture of self-defense, of a man pushed to the brink, forced to act in a moment of extreme duress. The prosecutor, a sharp-suited woman with an unwavering belief in black and white, tried to paint him as an accessory, as a man whose philosophy had directly led to murder. But the evidence of Luca's fanaticism, his twisted interpretation, and Julian's desperate attempt to stop him, coupled with my unwavering account, proved compelling. The jury, swayed by the drama, the narrative of the artist hero, and perhaps by a city desperate for a clear resolution, ultimately returned a verdict. Not guilty. Julian was acquitted of murder, deemed an act of self-defense. The city breathed a collective sigh of relief. The confessor was dead. Justice, in its own convoluted way, had been served. But the victory felt hollow, tainted by the choices I had made, the lines I had crossed, and the love I had found in the most dangerous of places. The neon lights of the city continued to bleed, and I, Anya Sharma, found myself walking through them, forever marked by the kiss of a killer, a love that was both my mission and my undoing. The city, a fickle lover at best, roared its approval and condemnation in equal measure. Julian's acquittal, delivered by a jury that had wrestled with the moral ambiguities of art and murder, echoed through the concrete canyons like a distant thunderclap. The confessor was dead, a monster vanquished, and the city, for a fleeting moment, exhaled. But the victory, for those of us caught in its brutal embrace, felt hollow, tainted, and imbued with a profound, almost suffocating melancholy. Julian Vance was a free man, legally absolved, but his reputation, once a shimmering testament to artistic genius, was now irrevocably stained, forever viewed through a macabre lens. His art, once celebrated for its unsettling beauty, was now inextricably linked to the very violence it sought to critique. He was no longer merely an artist, he was the man who had killed his fanatical follower, a modern-day Cain, forever marked by the blood he shed, even if it was in defense of another life. In defense of mine. I watched the news reports from the sterile quiet of my apartment, the television's blue light casting long, distorted shadows across the meticulously ordered sanctuary that now felt more like a cage. My face, or rather, Lena Thorne's face, flashed across the screen, juxtaposed with Julian's stoic profile. Detective Sharma, the unsung hero, whose unwavering testimony secured the artist's freedom. The words, meant to laud, felt like an accusation, a heavy cloak of false glory draped over a soul that felt bruised and raw. The praise suffocated me, each compliment a reminder of the choices I had made, the lines I had crossed, the treacherous dance I had performed. Miller, ever the anchor in my storm, found me there, a silent sentinel in the flickering light. He brought coffee, black and bitter, just the way I liked it. He didn't press, didn't offer platitudes. He simply sat, his presence a comforting weight in the room. "He's free," I murmured, my voice raspy, the words tasting like ash. "Yeah," Miller grunted, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "But at what cost, Anya? For him and for you." I looked out at the city, the neon bleeding its vibrant hues onto the rain, slicked streets, a deceptive veneer over its festering underbelly. "He retreated," I said, a statement, not a question. Julian, true to his nature, had vanished from the public eye almost immediately after the verdict. He had returned to the labyrinthine apartment complex, a ghost in his own grand, decaying palace, his studio gates now permanently locked to the world. "Good," Miller said, though his tone lacked conviction. "Best thing for him, best thing for everyone. The city's got its pound of flesh one way or another." "He lost everything, Miller," I countered, turning to face him, my eyes burning. "His career, his reputation, his peace, all because he tried to stop a monster he inadvertently created, all because he tried to save me." Miller met my gaze, his blue eyes kind but firm. "And you, Anya? What did you lose? What did you gain? You got your killer, you closed the case, That's what we do, isn't it? Is it? I whispered, the question hanging heavy in the air between us. Is it just about closing the case? What about the truth that shatters everything? What about the love you find in the most dangerous of places, a love born of deception and violence? He sighed, running a hand over his grizzled jaw. Look, kid, I've seen a lot of things in this job, a lot of grey areas. You did what you had to do. You brought down a killer. You saved a life. The rest is just the collateral damage of living in this city. He paused, then added, his voice softer, Don't let it eat you alive, Anya. You're too good for that. But the darkness Julian spoke of, the profound, unsettling truth of the human condition, had seeped into my own soul. The victory felt hollow, tainted by the choices I made, the lines I crossed, the brutal, beautiful tragedy of my connection to Julian. The case was closed, the confessor dead, but the echoes of his twisted art, the memory of Julian's desperate act, resonated within me, a constant, low hum beneath the surface of my consciousness. I saw Julian sometimes from a distance, a fleeting glance across a rain-slicked street, his tall, statuesque figure, now almost spectral, disappearing into the shadows of the labyrinthine. A shadow in a whispering cafe, his dark hair catching the light, his profile etched with a familiar intensity as he stared into a cup of coffee, seemingly lost in thought. There was no going back for us, no clean slate. Our love, born of deception and violence, was a beautiful, terrible tragedy, too complex, too damaged to ever truly flourish in the harsh light of day. The unspoken farewell on the rooftop, the silent question in his eyes after Luca's death, the quiet admission of his love through the jailhouse glass, these were the fragments of a story that had no happy ending, only a lingering, aching presence. One afternoon, a few weeks after the trial, I found myself walking past the labyrinthine, my steps almost unconsciously drawn to its decaying grandeur. The wrought iron gates of Julian's studio were indeed locked, a heavy chain and padlock sealing it off from the world. But as I passed his apartment window, high above, I thought I saw a flicker of movement, a brief shadow against the glass. My heart gave a familiar, unwelcome jolt. Later that week, a small, unassuming package arrived at my apartment. No sender's address, no note. Inside, nestled in a bed of shredded paper, was a small sculpture. It was a miniature version of the silent lament, the figure of anguish, the single, perfectly sculpted tear. But this one was different. The figure, though still tormented, held a tiny, almost imperceptible seed in its cupped hands, a symbol of nascent hope, of resilience. It was a macabre, yet strangely tender, art piece, a constant, unsettling reminder of our connection, a symbol of the beauty and horror I now carried within me. I placed it on my mantel, a silent sentinel, a testament to the man who had seen my hidden darkness and offered his own. My return to work was met with the usual departmental fanfare. Ramon, though still gruff, offered a nod of approval. Miller, his paternal concern ever present, made sure I took my accumulated vacation days. But I was different. More guarded than ever, the steely resolve that had defined me now tinged with a profound melancholy. The city, once a puzzle to be solved, now felt like a living, breathing entity, its pulse echoing my own changed rhythm. I understood its festering underbelly in a new, more personal way, having glimpsed its true depths, having walked hand in hand with its shadows. I sat at my desk, the fluorescent lights humming, a fresh stack of cold cases awaiting my attention. Each file, each victim, each unsolved mystery seemed to whisper a new layer of meaning. I had sought truth, and in doing so, I had shattered not just Julian, but myself. The haunting question lingered, a persistent echo in the quiet chambers of my mind. In the pursuit of justice, what parts of myself had I sacrificed? What had I become? My phone buzzed. It was Zoe, my irreverent CSI tech, her voice bright and cheerful. "Hey, Anya, got a weird one down at the docks. Looks like a ritual, but definitely not Confessor. Wanna come take a look? Might be good to get out of the office." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. The world kept turning. The darkness, though shifted, though changed, would always remain. And I, Anya Sharma, the brilliant detective, forever marked by the kiss of a killer, a love that was both her mission and her undoing, would walk through it, forever attuned to its whispers, forever searching for the elusive light. "Be right there, Zoe," I replied, pushing away from my desk, the small sculpture on my mantel casting a long shadow in the fading office light. The neon lights of the city continued to bleed, and I, a changed woman, walked towards them, towards the next shadow, towards the next truth, ready to face whatever new darkness the city held. The city, a colossal, breathing entity, continued its ceaseless rhythm, its neon heartbeat, a constant thrum against the bruised twilight. For me, Anya Sharma, the rhythm had shifted, subtly but irrevocably. The steely resolve that had once been my armor was now tinged with a profound melancholy, a quiet understanding of the abyssal depths that human hearts could plumb. The case of the Confessor was closed. Luca Rain, a silent stain on a derelict warehouse floor, and Julian Vance, a ghost in his own grand apartment complex. But the darkness Julian had spoken of, the complex interplay of judgment and consequence, of love and betrayal, had seeped into my own soul, painting my perception of the city and of my work in shades of grey I had never known before. My arm, though healed, bore a faint, silver scar, a tangible reminder of Luca's desperate rage and of Julian's desperate act. It was a physical manifestation of the invisible wounds I carried, a constant whisper of the choices I had made, the lines I had crossed. Ramon had given me my mandated vacation, a period of enforced idleness that had felt more like a purgatory. My apartment, once a meticulously ordered sanctuary, had become a quiet echo chamber for my thoughts, the small, macabre sculpture of The Silent Lament on my mantel a constant, unsettling reminder of the man who had seen into my soul. "Be right there, Zoe," I had said, pushing away from my desk, the words a lifeline back to the familiar, if now tainted, world of police work. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the scent of stale coffee and disinfectant, the organized chaos of the cold precinct. It was a comfort, a return to the known, even if the lens through which I viewed it was forever altered. The docks, even in the early hours of what promised to be a perpetually overcast day, possessed a raw, visceral energy. The air was thick with the briny tang of the sea, the metallic scent of ships, and the distant mournful cry of gulls. Rain had begun again, a soft, persistent drizzle that slicked the cobblestones and blurred the edges of the towering cranes that clawed at the sky. Zoe, her electric blue streaks almost glowing in the dim light, was already there, meticulously bagging evidence, her petite figure a whirlwind of efficient motion. Miller, bundled in his perpetually ill-fitting trench coat, stood a few feet away, surveying the scene with his characteristic world-weary gaze. "Morning, detective," Zoe greeted, a wide, almost too bright smile on her face. "Welcome back to the beautiful world of human depravity. Missed you, boss." "Morning, Zoe," I replied, a faint smile touching my lips. Her irreverence was a balm, a familiar anchor in a world that felt increasingly surreal. "What have we got?" Miller grunted, gesturing with his chin towards the center of the scene, cordoned off by yellow tape. "Another one for the books, Anya. Not Confessor, definitely not. No artistic flair, no grand pronouncements. Just brutal." The victim, a man in his late 40s, was slumped against a stack of rotting crates, his eyes wide and vacant. There was no single, perfectly sculpted tear, no symbolic rose petal, just a crude, violent end. But what caught my eye, what made Zoe call it weird, was the small, intricately carved wooden bird clutched in his hand, its wings broken, its tiny painted eyes staring blankly at the sky, and etched into the crate above his head, crudely, but unmistakably, was a single stylized feather. "A feather," I murmured, my mind immediately going to Julian's description of Luca's symbolic feather, a lament for purity lost. But this was different, cruder, less refined. "Yeah, a feather," Miller confirmed. "And the bird? Some kind of folk art, maybe. Dr. Marquez is scratching his head on this one. Says it's a ritualistic element, but not one he's seen before. Any ID on the victim?" I asked, kneeling beside Zoe, whose gloved hands were carefully examining the bird. "Not yet," Zoe said, peering closer at the carving. "No wallet, no phone. Looks like he was stripped of anything identifying, and a lot of bruising, not just from the fatal blow. Looks like he was worked over, tortured maybe." My gaze lingered on the broken bird, then on the crudely etched feather. Julian mentioned Luca's obsession with fallen angels, with clipped wings, with symbols of lost purity. Miller raised an eyebrow. "Vance still whispering sweet nothings in your ear, Anya?" His tone was light, but his eyes held a hint of concern. I met his gaze, a flicker of my new guardedness asserting itself. "No, Miller. Just recalling details from the Confessor case. Luca used a black feather. This is different, more primitive, less precise." "Right," Miller said, though his expression remained unconvinced. "Well, whatever it is, it's not our artist. This is a street brawl that went too far, with some weird spiritual overtones thrown in for good measure. Probably some petty gang dispute, a message sent. But my gut, now uniquely attuned to the city's whispers, felt a tremor of something more. It feels personal, Miller. The bird, the feather, not just a message of power, but of judgment. A different kind of judgment. Zoe, ever observant, chimed in. "I found trace amounts of a very specific kind of pigment on the bird, detective. Not commercial. Looks like it was made with crushed minerals mixed with some kind of resin. And the wood, it's local, but specifically from the ancient willow tree down by the old canal. Very distinct grain." "The old canal," I mused, my mind sifting through the city's forgotten lore. "That's near the old fisherman's wharf, isn't it? Where the old-timers used to tell stories of the River King and his judgments." Miller scoffed. "River King? Anya, you're letting Vance's philosophy get to you. We're looking for a killer, not a mythical creature." "Perhaps the killer believes in mythical creatures, Miller," I countered, standing up, my eyes scanning the grimy docks. "Perhaps he believes he's enacting some ancient justice, not just a gang vendetta. You think we've got another thematic killer on our hands?" Zoe asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Like a copycat, but with a different muse." "Not a copycat," I clarified. "A different narrative. The Confessor's victims were chosen for their societal crimes, their moral failings in the public eye. This feels like a judgment against a more intimate betrayal." A personal offense, perhaps, linked to the traditions of this specific place. Over the next few days, the initial skepticism of the precinct slowly gave way to a grudging acceptance of my theory. Dr. Marquez, the medical examiner, confirmed that the bruising indicated a prolonged, ritualistic beating, not just a spontaneous act of violence. The victim, a Mr. Arthur Finch, was a small-time loan shark. Dr. Marquez informed us, his pale grey eyes glinting with his usual morbid humour. Known for preying on the vulnerable, particularly the fishing community down at the old wharf. He'd take their boats, their homes, their livelihoods. A real leech. And the bird? I asked. Dr. Marquez held up a photo of the carved bird, the broken wings, the specific wood from the old canal willow. I've heard stories, old maritime superstitions. The River King, the protector of the waters and its people. He punishes those who betray the community, who exploit the weak. And the broken bird, it symbolizes a promise broken, a spirit crushed. So, someone took the law into their own hands, Miller grumbled, still clinging to the simpler explanation. Or someone believes they were enacting a higher law, I said, looking at the photo of the feather. The feather, it's a common symbol of justice in some indigenous riverine cultures. A feather for a life taken, a feather for a truth revealed. My new perspective, honed by Julian's insights into the city's underbelly, allowed me to see patterns where others saw only chaos. I started spending my evenings down at the old fisherman's wharf, not just as a detective, but as an observer. I spoke to the old-timers, the weathered faces etched with decades of hardship and resilience. I listened to their stories, their laments, their quiet rage against the forces that had slowly chipped away at their way of life. They spoke of Arthur Finch with a mixture of fear and a strange, almost satisfied silence. No one mourned him. Everyone knew his crimes. One evening, I found myself in a dimly lit tavern near the docks, the air thick with the smell of stale beer and desperation. I was sipping a lukewarm beer, trying to blend in, when a young woman, Eliana Verdu, a barista from a cafe I occasionally frequented, walked in. She was a brunette with a pixie cut, large brown eyes, and a scatter of piercings along each ear. She worked at a local art collective by day, serving coffee and dreams. I knew her from seeing her in Julian's apartment building as well. She often brought him coffee. She was earnest, dreamy, and unguarded, approaching everyone with wide-eyed curiosity. She saw me and her eyes widened. "Detective Sharma, what are you doing down here?" "Just observing," I replied, gesturing vaguely at the bustling tavern, trying to understand the pulse of this part of the city. She slid onto the stool next to me, her face alight with an almost childlike enthusiasm. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Raw, real, not like the polished facades of downtown. There's so much history here, so many stories. Stories of justice, perhaps." I probed gently, watching her reaction. She nodded, her gaze distant. "My grandfather, he was a fisherman. He lost everything to men like Arthur Finch. He used to tell me stories of the River King, the protector. He said the River King always finds a way to balance the scales even when human laws fail." She paused, then lowered her voice, a conspiratorial whisper. "He said the River King has many hands, detective, not just one." "Many hands?" I asked, my heart quickening. "Yeah," she said, her eyes meeting mine, a spark of unexpected intuition in their depths. "He said, when a community is broken, when its trust is betrayed, the river itself chooses its champions, not just one, but many. each one a piece of the river's will. Her words echoed Julian's own philosophy, his insights into the collective consciousness, the unspoken fears, the festering resentments. It wasn't a single disciple like Luca, but a collective, a community acting as one, driven by a shared sense of injustice. "Did your grandfather know Arthur Finch?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Her face clouded. "He did. Finch took his boat, his livelihood. He died a broken man, not long after." Her hands, usually so expressive, clenched into fists. "Sometimes, detective, justice needs a push, a very strong push." Her words, so casually delivered, sent a chill down my spine. The truth, as Julian had warned, was far more complex and personal than I could have ever imagined. The killer wasn't a single deranged individual, but perhaps an entire community driven to desperate measures by systemic injustice. The River King wasn't a mythical creature. It was the collective will of the forgotten, the reviled, rising up to balance the scales. I returned to the precinct, my mind buzzing with Eliana's words. With the images of the broken bird and the etched feather, I laid out my theory to Miller and Ramon, the idea of a communal justice, a collective confessor. Ramon, initially skeptical, listened intently. "So, you're saying a whole community conspired to kill this loan shark? That's a stretch, Anya. We need hard evidence. Fingerprints, eyewitnesses, a direct link. We have the unique pigment on the bird, from the old canal willow, a specific symbol," I argued. "We have a motive that resonates deeply with the community, and we have a pattern of ritualistic justice, not unlike the Confessor, but rooted in a different philosophy." "They're not trying to hide it, Chief. They're trying to send a message, a warning." Miller, surprisingly, seemed to be coming around. "She's got a point, Ramon. The old-timers down there, they're fiercely loyal. And Finch was a nasty piece of work. It wouldn't surprise me if they all looked the other way, or even participated." The idea was audacious, almost unbelievable. A city, a community, driven to collective murder by a sense of righteous indignation. It was a reflection of the darkness Julian had spoken of, the festering underbelly of a society that claims to be just, yet is profoundly unjust. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered, a prickle of unease running down my spine. "Anya." Julian's voice, low and resonant, came through the line, a ghost from my recent past. "I hear you're back in the game, and I hear you're looking into the River King." My breath caught. "How did you know?" "The city whispers, Anya," he replied, a faint, sardonic amusement in his tone. "And I listen. I told you, I understand the collective unconscious, the unspoken resentments. The River King, he's an old legend, a potent symbol of communal justice, a response to systemic neglect. A different kind of judgment, perhaps, but a judgment nonetheless." "And what do you think?" I asked, my heart hammering. "I think," he said, his voice dropping, becoming more intimate, "that you're seeing the city with new eyes, Anya. With eyes that understand the nuances, the complexities, the terrible beauty of its darkness. You've crossed the threshold, haven't you? From observer to participant, from hunter to something more." His words, so perceptive, so unsettlingly accurate, resonated deep within me. He saw me, truly saw me, even from his self-imposed exile. The victory over the Confessor had felt hollow, but this new case, this new understanding of the city's heart, felt different. It was a victory of perception, a broadening of my own soul. "Be careful, Anya," he cautioned, his voice now laced with a familiar concern. When you stare into the abyss also stares into you, and sometimes it whispers back. The line went dead, leaving me in the silence of the precinct, the hum of the fluorescent lights suddenly louder. I stared at the phone, then at the case file, the image of the broken bird and the etched feather burning in my mind. The city was indeed whispering, and I, Anya Sharma, was now uniquely attuned to its dark, complex melodies. The pursuit of justice had shattered me, yes, but it had also rebuilt me, a new kind of detective, forever marked by the kiss of a killer, a love that was both my mission and my undoing, now ready to delve into the even deeper, more communal abysses of the city's bruised heart. The city, an old wise beast, had many voices. After Julian's cryptic warning, when you stare into the abyss also stares into you. And sometimes it whispers back. I found myself listening more intently to those voices, not just the sirens and the street noise, but the deeper currents, the unspoken resentments that pulsed beneath the concrete. The River King case, as I had come to call it, was rapidly becoming less about finding a single perpetrator and more about understanding the collective soul of a forgotten community, a communal justice born of desperation and deep-seated grievances. My initial theory, the audacious idea of a collective confessor, had been met with predictable skepticism at the precinct. Ramon, ever the pragmatist, demanded hard evidence. Anya, a mob isn't a single killer. We need an individual, a leader, someone we can put behind bars. This River King theory, it's poetic, but it's not actionable. But what if the leader is the collective will, Chief? I countered, my voice firm. What if the executioners are merely the hands of the community, carrying out a judgment that everyone agrees upon? I had spent the last few days interviewing the dock workers, the shop owners, the residents of the decaying tenements that clung to the water's edge. Their eyes, though guarded, held a uniform coldness when Arthur Finch's name was mentioned. No one mourned him. Many quietly celebrated his demise. That's still vigilantism, Sharma, Ramon had argued, running a hand through his perpetually neat black curls. And we don't condone vigilantism. Our job is to uphold the law, not to understand the motivations of those who break it, no matter how sympathetic. But understanding the motivation is how we prevent the next one. I pressed, feeling a familiar frustration. The pursuit of justice, I was learning, was rarely a clean, linear path. It was a labyrinth of human emotion, obscured by layers of social decay and individual pain. Zoe, bless her irreverent heart, was my staunchest ally. She'd spent hours meticulously analyzing the materials from the Finch crime scene. The pigment, Anya, it's not just crushed minerals. It's a mix of river clay, pulverized mussel shells, and something organic, maybe a specific type of algae. It's indigenous to the deeper parts of the old canal, where the water is still relatively clean, and the wood for the bird, definitely the ancient willow. It's like a signature, but one drawn from the very ecosystem of this community. So, someone intimately familiar with the local environment, I mused, staring at the enlarged photo of the broken bird. Someone who uses the river itself as their canvas. Miller, while still grumbling about mythical creatures, had started to come around, his years of street experience recognizing the simmering resentment in the dock community. They're tight-lipped down there, Anya, like a family protecting its own. Finch was bad news, no doubt. But for them to organize something like this, it takes a certain kind of desperation. My investigation led me deeper into the labyrinthine alleys of the old Fisherman's Wharf, a world away from the glittering skyscrapers of downtown. It was a place where time seemed to have stalled, where the faces were etched with hardship and resilience, and where the river, a dark, pulsing artery, dictated the rhythm of life. I found myself drawn to a small, unassuming fish market, its wooden stalls overflowing with the day's catch. The air was thick with the scent of salt and fresh fish, a welcome contrast to the city's usual acrid perfume. Behind the counter, an old man with hands like gnarled roots and eyes that held the wisdom of generations cleaned a fish with practiced ease. This was Matteo, Eliana Verdu's grandfather, the one who had spoken of the River King. "Matteo, good morning," I said, approaching the counter. "Detective Sharma." We spoke briefly on the phone. He grunted, not looking up from his work. "Police, always asking questions, never listening." "I'm listening now," I said gently, leaning against the counter. "Eliana told me about your stories. About the River King, about Arthur Finch." He stopped, his knife poised over the fish, and looked at me, his eyes surprisingly sharp. "Finch, a parasite, he took from us. He took my son's boat. He took my grandson's future." His voice was low, raspy, filled with a quiet, simmering rage. "The river, it has a way of balancing things." "Eliana said the River King has many hands," I probed, watching his face. "That when a community is broken, the river chooses its champions." He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Eliana, she's a dreamer, always was. But sometimes dreams, they have a way of becoming real. When the law fails, when the powerful crush the weak, then the old ways, they stir." He looked out at the grey, churning waters of the canal. "The river, it remembers. It remembers the injustices, and it demands its due." "Did the river demand Arthur Finch's due, Matteo?" I asked directly, my voice barely a whisper. He met my gaze, his eyes unblinking. "The river, it is patient, detective. It waits. But when it moves with the force of many currents. You cannot stop the river, detective. You can only learn to swim with it, or be swept away." He turned back to his fish, a definitive end to the conversation. His words resonated with Julian's earlier philosophical musings, his insights into the collective unconscious. It wasn't just a simple murder, it was a societal response, a desperate act of self-preservation by a community pushed to its breaking point. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Anya." "Still chasing ghosts from the water." Julian's voice, low and resonant, was like a familiar melody in the cacophony of the fish market. "Matteo just told me I can't stop the river," I said, a wry smile touching my lips. "He also implied the River King has many hands." Julian chuckled, a soft, almost melancholic sound. "A wise man, Matteo. He understands the power of a shared narrative, a collective will. The Confessor, Luca, he was an individual, a singular madness. The River King, that's a different beast entirely. It's the rage of the many, channeled through a shared belief system. It's far more dangerous, Anya, and far more difficult to contain." "You sound like you've studied this too," I observed, walking out of the fish market, seeking a quieter spot. "I study all forms of judgment." "Anya," he replied, his voice tinged with a familiar weariness. "The city is a fascinating specimen. Its underbelly always reveals its true nature. The River King legend, it's an ancient one, a response to the abuses of power, the failure of institutions. It speaks to a deep primal yearning for balance, for retribution when justice is denied." "So, you believe it's a collective?" I asked, seeking confirmation of my own unsettling theory. "I believe it's a manifestation of a collective trauma, Anya," he clarified. A community's pain, given form. It's not a single mastermind you're looking for. It's the very fabric of their society, stretched to its breaking point. How do you arrest a collective consciousness? His words, as always, were both insightful and unsettling. They mirrored my own growing understanding, but also highlighted the immense challenge before me. How do you bring justice to a situation where the line between victim and perpetrator is so blurred, so deeply rooted in systemic injustice? I have to try, I said, my voice firm. This is still murder, Julian, no matter the motivation. And you, Anya, are still a detective, he said, a note of admiration in his voice. Driven by a rigid sense of duty, even when the path is fraught with moral ambiguity. Be careful. The River King, unlike Luca, does not seek individual glory, it seeks to protect its own. And those who interfere, they often find themselves swept away. The line went dead, leaving me standing on the docks, the rain falling softly on my face, the whispers of the river seeming to echo Julian's warning. His call, his continued observation, was a strange comfort, a dangerous tether to a world I was trying to navigate without him. Back at the precinct, I called a meeting with Miller, Ramon, and Dr. Marquez. I laid out my findings, the conversations with Mateo, Eliana's insights, Zoe's forensic data. The River King isn't a single person, Chief, I concluded. It's a collective, a community-wide agreement to enact justice where they feel the law has failed them. Finch was their first victim, a clear message. We need to prevent the next one. Ramon leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, his eyes narrowed in thought. So, we're looking for a community conspiracy? That's an administrative nightmare, Anya. How do we prove intent? How do we identify the hands of the River King? We need to understand their grievances, Chief, I argued. We need to understand the systemic issues that led them to this point, and we need to find out who the next target might be. Dr. Marquez, surprisingly, chimed in. Anya has a point, Ramon. The psychological profile of a communal justice system is fascinating. It's not a single deranged mind, but a shared narrative of oppression and retribution. It's a powerful motivator. And if they've started, they won't stop until the perceived balance is restored. Miller, ever practical, added, and if we go in there heavy-handed, we'll just turn the whole community against us. We'll have a riot on our hands, not a murder investigation. Ramon sighed, running a hand over his face. All right, Sharma, you've got a week. Find me something concrete. Something that ties specific individuals to Finch's death or to a future target. But no more mythical creatures. I need names, Anya. I need evidence that stands up in court. The ultimatum hung in the air, a familiar pressure. But this time it felt different. I wasn't just hunting a killer. I was navigating a complex moral landscape where the lines between right and wrong, between justice and vengeance, were blurred beyond recognition. I decided to start with Eliana. She was young, idealistic, and deeply connected to the community. I found her at the art collective, covered in paint, her eyes bright with creative energy. Eliana, I said, approaching her, keeping my voice soft, non-threatening. I need your help. Your grandfather spoke of the River King. You spoke of it. I believe you understand this community better than anyone. She looked at me, her wide brown eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and caution. What kind of help, detective? I need to understand who the River King might target next, I explained. I believe there will be another judgment, and I want to prevent it. She hesitated, then wiped a streak of paint from her cheek. The River King. It doesn't just choose targets, detective. It chooses those who have broken the sacred trust of the river. Those who pollute the waters, those who exploit the people, those who betray the community. She lowered her voice, a conspiratorial whisper. There's talk of the city councilman, Mr. Harrison. He approved the permit for the new chemical plant upstream. It's poisoning the river, killing the fish, killing our way of life. My blood ran cold. Councilman Harrison, a prominent figure, an untouchable. If the River King went after him, it would be a declaration of war, a direct challenge to the city's power structure. And who would carry out this judgment? I asked, my voice barely audible. Eliana shrugged, a faint, almost imperceptible sadness in her eyes. Anyone, everyone. It's not about one person, detective. It's about the river. And the river, it will have its due. She paused, then added, her voice tinged with a strange mix of hope and despair. My art, I try to capture the spirit of the river. Its power, its resilience, its anger. She gestured to a canvas, a swirling vortex of blues and greens, with dark, ominous shapes lurking beneath the surface. It was beautiful, terrifying, and profound. It was the river, personified. I stared at the painting, then back at Eliana, her youthful idealism now tinged with a dangerous fervor. She was a witness, a muse, and perhaps an unwitting participant. The city's whispers were growing louder, and the abyss was indeed staring back, revealing a truth far more complex and personal than I could have ever imagined. The River King was not a myth. It was a living, breathing entity, and I, Anya Sharma, was caught in its powerful, relentless current. The neon lights of the city continued to bleed, and I walked towards them, my path illuminated by a dangerous, unsettling clarity. The city, a colossal, breathing entity, continued its ceaseless rhythm, its neon heartbeat a constant thrum against the bruised twilight. But for me, Anya Sharma, that rhythm was now discordant, a cacophony of conflicting loyalties and a terrifying premonition. Eliana's words, delivered with such innocent conviction, echoed Julian's earlier warnings with chilling precision. Councilman Harrison, the new chemical plant, the poisoned river, the River King's next judgment. It was a leap from a small-time loan shark to a powerful city official, a declaration of war against the very institutions I was sworn to uphold. The abyss, as Julian had warned, was indeed staring back, and its whispers were growing louder, more insistent, threatening to drown out the last vestiges of my rational thought. I left Eliana at the art collective, her painting of the swirling, angry river, a stark image burned into my mind. The rain had softened to a persistent mist, blurring the edges of the city, making everything feel ethereal and dangerous. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots, to translate the communal rage into actionable intelligence. How do you protect a man from a river? How do you arrest a collective consciousness? Back at the cold precinct, the fluorescent lights hummed with their usual indifferent drone, a stark contrast to the organic, visceral anger simmering down by the docks. Ramon was in his office, his face etched with the familiar lines of bureaucratic frustration. Miller was hunched over his desk, nursing a lukewarm coffee, a mountain of paperwork threatening to engulf him. "Chief Miller, I need to talk to you about the River King case," I began, my voice cutting through the quiet hum of the office. Ramon looked up, his expression wary. "More mythical creatures, Sharma? Because I need something concrete. Something I can present to the mayor, not a bedtime story about angry fish." "It's not mythical, Chief," I insisted, placing a folder of my notes on his desk. It's a very real threat, and the next target is Councilman Harrison. Both men stiffened. Miller's coffee cup clattered against his desk. Harrison, the chemical plant guy? Anya, you're talking about a city councilman, a public official. This is a whole different league. Exactly, I said, leaning forward. Arthur Finch was a warning, a local problem. Harrison is a direct challenge to the city's power structure, to the very notion that the law protects the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. The community down at the docks, they feel betrayed by him. They believe his plant is poisoning their river, destroying their livelihood, and literally killing their way of life. Ramon sighed, rubbing his temples. All right, lay it out, Anya. What's your evidence? Besides the word of a barista and an old fisherman about a mythical river king, I explained Eliana's insights, Mateo's veiled warnings, Zoe's forensic findings about the unique pigment from the river ecosystem. The River King isn't a single person, Chief. It's a collective, a community-wide agreement to enact justice where they feel the law has failed them. Harrison approved that plant permit, knowing the environmental impact. To them, he's corrupted the river itself. Miller interjected, his voice grave. I've been making some calls, Ramon. The environmental impact reports on that plant were glossed over, and there's whispers of some hefty campaign contributions from the chemical company right before the permit was approved. Harrison isn't exactly squeaky clean. Ramon pinched the bridge of his nose. Even if that's true, Miller, we can't just let a community take the law into their own hands. We have to protect him. This isn't a vigilante, this is a mob. And a mob, however righteous their anger, is still dangerous. He looked at me, his eyes sharp. What's your plan, Anya? How do we protect a man from a collective? We warn him, I said, and we try to understand their grievances, to address the systemic issues that led them to this point. We show them that the law can work for them, not just against them. Warn him? Ramon scoffed. You think Councilman Harrison is going to listen to a detective who's been chasing a mythical river king, telling him his constituents are plotting his demise? He'll laugh you out of his office, Anya. Or worse, he'll use it to drum up sympathy and paint the dock community as terrorists. Then I'll make him listen, I said, my jaw tight. I'll tell him exactly what's at stake. And if he doesn't listen, then at least we've done our part. The meeting with Councilman Harrison was, predictably, a study in dismissive arrogance. His office was a testament to his power. Polished mahogany, leather, bound books, and a sprawling view of the city's glittering financial district, a world away from the grimy docks. He was a man of impeccably tailored suits and a condescending smile that never quite reached his eyes. Detective Sharma, he greeted, gesturing to a plush chair. His voice smooth, unctuous. To what do I owe this? Unexpected pleasure? I trust this isn't about a parking ticket. He chuckled, a thin, humorless sound. Councilman Harrison, I began, my voice devoid of emotion. I'm here to inform you that we have credible intelligence suggesting you are the next target of a group operating under the moniker of the River King. His smile faltered, replaced by a look of amused disdain. The River King? Are you quite serious, detective? Are we talking about some kind of urban legend? Perhaps a disgruntled fisherman with too much time on his hands? This disgruntled fisherman, as you call him, councilman, has already claimed one life, I stated, my gaze unwavering. Arthur Finch, the loan shark. Harrison waved a dismissive hand. Finch? A lowlife. Probably deserved what he got. A street brawl gone wrong, wasn't it? Hardly the work of some mythical aquatic monarch. It was a ritualistic killing, councilman. I pressed, my voice hardening. A judgment enacted by a community driven to desperation by what they perceive as systemic injustice, and they view you and your chemical plant as the embodiment of that injustice. They believe you are poisoning their river, their livelihood, their very lives. He leaned back in his chair, a flicker of something cold and calculating in his eyes. Detective, I am a public servant. My decisions are made for the economic betterment of this city, for job creation. The chemical plant provides hundreds of jobs, and all environmental impact studies were approved by the proper authorities. Those studies were, at best, incomplete, councilman, I countered, pulling out a printout of Miller's preliminary findings. At worst, they were falsified, and there are whispers of significant campaign contributions tied to their approval. His face tightened. Are you accusing me of corruption, detective? His voice, though still smooth, held a dangerous edge. I'm telling you that a community, which feels ignored and exploited, believes you have betrayed their trust, I said, meeting his gaze, and they are preparing to deliver their own form of justice. We have reason to believe they may target you in the coming days. He scoffed, a short, sharp burst of air. This is preposterous. A fishing village uprising? What do you expect me to do, detective? Hide under my desk? I have security. I have a public profile. These are just disgruntled troublemakers. They are desperate people, councilman, I corrected. And desperation can be a powerful motivator. We can offer you protection, but you need to take this seriously and perhaps address their grievances, re-evaluate the plant's impact. Show them that the system can work for them. He stood up, signaling the end of our meeting, his condescending smile firmly back in place. Thank you for your concern, detective, but I assure you, I am perfectly capable of handling a few angry fishermen. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a city to run. I left his office with a familiar knot of frustration tightening in my stomach. Ramon had been right. Harrison was oblivious, arrogant, and utterly convinced of his own untouchability. The city's blind eye, its indifference to its own festering underbelly, was as much a part of the problem as the River King's wrath. That night, the whispers of the river seemed to follow me even into my apartment. The small sculpture of The Silent Lament on my mantel seemed to pulse with a quiet, knowing energy. I found myself drawn to the window, staring out at the city, its neon lights bleeding into the rain-slicked streets. My phone buzzed a secure line. It was Miller. Anya, I've got something, not concrete, but disturbing. Councilman Harrison is scheduled to attend a groundbreaking ceremony tomorrow morning down by the new municipal marina. It's right on the river, a big press event. My blood ran cold. A public event, on the river, a perfect stage for the River King's next tableau. And his security detail? I asked, my voice tight, minimal. He dismissed our offer of extra protection, said he didn't want to look like he was afraid of a few angry constituents. He's a pompous ass, Anya. He's a dead man walking. Miller, I corrected, grabbing my coat. Unless we do something, get a team together, undercover. I want plain clothes, inconspicuous. And I want Zoe with her equipment, ready to analyze anything we find. You think they'll strike in broad daylight? Miller asked, a note of disbelief in his voice. At a public event? If they want to send a message to the city, to the institutions that have ignored them, then yes, I said, my mind racing. It's a declaration, a direct challenge. This isn't about hiding in the shadows anymore. This is about making a statement. I hung up and found myself pacing my apartment, the familiar anxiety of an impending crisis tightening its grip. I knew Julian would understand this. He understood the theatricality of judgment, the power of a statement. I almost reached for my phone to call him, to seek his insight, his unsettlingly accurate predictions, but I stopped myself. He was a ghost, an echo. I had to navigate this labyrinth on my own. The next morning, the air was thick with a nervous energy. The municipal marina, usually a bustling hub of activity, was now a carefully controlled environment. Uniformed officers were discreetly positioned, but their presence was subdued, designed not to alarm the public or antagonize the dock community. The press was out in force, their cameras flashing, their microphones bristling like antennae. Councilman Harrison, resplendent in a crisp suit, stood at the podium, his condescending smile firmly in place, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension. Miller and I were positioned near the back, blending in with the crowd of onlookers. Zoe, in a surprisingly chic civilian outfit, was lurking near the water's edge, a small, inconspicuous bag of forensic tools at her feet. "He's really enjoying this, isn't he?" Miller muttered, his voice low. "Playing the big man, defying the angry fisherman. He won't be enjoying it for long," I replied, my eyes scanning the crowd, searching for any anomalies, any subtle signs of coordinated movement. The dock community was present, a quiet, watchful presence on the fringes of the event. Their faces were impassive, their eyes holding a familiar, unreadable intensity. Harrison launched into his speech, a monotonous drone about progress, prosperity, and the boundless opportunities the chemical plant would bring. He spoke of the river as a resource to be exploited, not a living entity to be respected. His words grated, an insult to the very people standing before him. Then a ripple ran through the crowd. Not a shout, not a protest, but a subtle shift. People began to turn their heads, their gazes drawn to the river itself. A small, wooden boat, old and weathered, drifted slowly towards the marina. It was unmanned, its sails furled, propelled only by the gentle current. As it drew closer, the crowd gasped. Tied to the mast, a crude, life-sized effigy of a man hung suspended, its face a grotesque caricature of Councilman Harrison. It was adorned with fishing nets, discarded plastic bottles, and dead fish, their glassy eyes staring blankly. And, clutched in its wooden hands, was a large, intricately carved wooden fish, its scales painted with the same unique pigment Zoe had identified. The silence that descended upon the marina was absolute, broken only by the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. The message was clear, chilling, and undeniable. The River King had made its move. Not with violence, not with a direct attack, but with a powerful, symbolic declaration, a tableau of judgment enacted in broad daylight for all the city to see. Harrison, his face now ashen, his condescending smile completely gone, stared at the effigy, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. He finally understood. "Zoe, get to that boat." I commanded into my comms, my voice sharp. "Miller, keep an eye on Harrison. Don't let him out of your sight. And everyone else, look for anyone leaving the scene, anyone acting suspiciously." But there was no one acting suspiciously. The dock community, their faces still impassive, simply watched, a quiet, collective triumph in their eyes. The River King had spoken, and its many hands had delivered its message. It was a victory for them, a haunting victory that underscored the city's profound disconnect, its willful blindness to the festering wounds it had allowed to fester. The neon lights of the city continued to bleed, and I, Anya Sharma, stood amidst the stunned silence, realizing that sometimes the most profound darkness isn't in the shadows, but in the glaring, unyielding light of truth. The city, a titan of ambition and indifference, reeled from the quiet, chilling spectacle at the municipal marina. The effigy of Councilman Harrison, adrift on the river, a grotesque symbol of judgment, had sent a seismic tremor through the polished halls of power. It was not the explosive violence of the Confessor, but a far more insidious, unsettling act, a public shaming, a communal declaration, performed in broad daylight, that stripped away the veneer of civility and exposed the raw, festering wounds beneath. For me, Anya Sharma, standing amidst the stunned silence, the air thick with the metallic tang of the river and the unspoken rage of the dock community, it was a haunting victory, a confirmation of Julian's profound insights into the city's unseen currents. The initial shock gave way to a flurry of chaotic activity. Councilman Harrison, his face now a mask of ashen terror, was immediately whisked away by his security detail, his public persona shattered, his voice a strangled, indignant squawk. Uniformed officers swarmed the marina, pushing back the gawking crowds, their movements frantic, almost desperate, to assert control over a situation that felt utterly beyond their grasp. The press, a ravenous pack, descended upon the scene, their cameras flashing like hungry eyes, their microphones bristling, eager to capture every nuance of this unprecedented public humiliation. Zoe, bless her meticulous heart, was already at the water's edge, her small, inconspicuous bag of forensic tools now fully deployed. She directed a team of officers, her voice calm and authoritative, as they carefully retrieved the wooden boat and its macabre cargo. "Careful with that effigy, gentlemen," she instructed, her electric blue streaks glinting in the morning light. "Every piece of plastic, every dead fish, every bit of netting is evidence. And for God's sake, don't disturb that carved fish in its hands." Miller, his face a thundercloud, was already on the phone, barking into his comms, trying to coordinate the rapidly unfolding chaos. He caught my eye, a silent question passing between us. "Well, you were right, Anya," he grunted, his voice low, filled with a grim satisfaction. "They made their statement all right, loud and clear. Ramon's going to have an aneurysm." And indeed, Ramon did. The moment I stepped back into the cold precinct, the air crackled with his barely contained fury. His office door stood open, a silent invitation to the storm within. He paced like a caged tiger, his dark suit rumpled, his usually impeccable hair disheveled. "Sharma," he roared, the moment I appeared in the doorway. "What the hell was that, Anya? A city councilman publicly humiliated. The mayor's office is in an absolute frenzy. They want arrests, they want names. And what do I have to give them? A theory about a mythical river king and some angry fishermen." "It wasn't mythical, Chief," I countered, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands. "It was real, and it was a direct consequence of ignoring their grievances. I warned Harrison, he chose to ignore it. And now he's a laughingstock." Ramon slammed his fist on his desk, making the pens jump. "This isn't justice, Anya, this is anarchy. You said you'd prevent the next one, you failed." "I prevented a murder, Chief," I stated, meeting his furious gaze. "They sent a message, a powerful one. They didn't resort to violence against Harrison. Not yet. This was a warning. A final plea, perhaps." "A plea?" "They strung up an effigy of a city councilman with dead fish and trash." "That's not a plea. That's a declaration of war." He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration palpable. "We need to identify who was involved. Who built that effigy? Who launched that boat? Who orchestrated this entire spectacle?" "That's the challenge, Chief," I explained, pulling up Zoe's preliminary report on my tablet. Zoe's analysis of the effigy shows it was assembled from materials readily available to the dock community: discarded fishing nets, local plastic waste, fish from the river. The carved fish was made from the same willow wood and pigment as the one found with Finch. It's their signature, but it's a communal signature. No individual fingerprints. No direct eyewitnesses to the launch. Everyone on the docks claims to have seen nothing, heard nothing. They're a wall of silence, Chief. A collective. Miller, who had quietly entered the office, added, "She's right, Ramon. I've got officers down there now, trying to lean on a few of them. They're not talking, they're scared, but they're also united. This isn't a few bad apples. This is the entire orchard." Ramon sank into his chair, rubbing his temples. "So, what do you suggest, Sharma? We arrest the entire dock community. How do we prove intent? How do we get a conviction against a mob that refuses to cooperate?" "We don't," I said, my voice low. "Not yet. We change the game. We address the root cause. We use this as leverage to force the city to listen to their grievances, to re-evaluate the chemical plant, to investigate the environmental damage, to truly engage with this community." Ramon stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You want to use a public humiliation of a city official to force policy change? Anya, you're a detective, not a politician. That's not our job." "Our job is to maintain law and order, Chief," I argued. "And when the law becomes an instrument of oppression, when order is maintained by ignoring the suffering of an entire community, then we have to ask ourselves, what kind of law, what kind of order are we protecting? This isn't just about a crime, Ramon. It's about a system that's broken. And if we don't fix the system, the River King will keep coming back. And next time, it might not be an effigy." He sighed, a long, weary exhalation. "All right, Sharma. You've got a week. 1 week. You find me something concrete, something that ties specific individuals to Finch's death or to a future, more violent target. But you also try your community engagement approach. See if you can diffuse this before it escalates. But understand this, if anything happens to Harrison, or if this River King moves beyond symbolic acts, your head is on the chopping block, and mine right after it." The ultimatum hung heavy in the air. I nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the immense pressure, the impossible tightrope I was now walking. My week began not with warrants and interrogations, but with listening. I returned to the docks, not in my detective's uniform, but in plain clothes, blending into the background. I spent hours in the fish markets, the taverns, the community centers, just observing, listening, absorbing the rhythm of their lives, the quiet dignity of their struggles. I listened to their stories of the river, not just as a source of livelihood, but as a living entity, a sacred trust, a reflection of their own souls. I reconnected with Eliana Verdu, finding her at the art collective, surrounded by her vibrant, often angry canvases. She was painting a new piece, a swirling vortex of deep blues and menacing greens, with broken fish and discarded plastic bottles woven into the texture, a chilling reflection of the poisoned river. "The river is angry, Anya," she said, her voice soft but resolute. As I watched her work, "It cries out, and sometimes its children must speak for it." "Do you believe in violence, Eliana?" I asked, my gaze fixed on her painting. She paused, her brush hovering over the canvas. "I believe in balance, detective. When the scales are tipped too far, when one side takes everything and gives nothing, then a force must rise to restore equilibrium. It's not about violence for its own sake. It's about survival. It's about justice. And what if that force harms innocent people?" I pressed. She turned to me, her wide, brown eyes filled with a profound sadness. "Are there truly any innocent people, detective, in a system that allows such injustice to fester? Even those who stand by who do nothing, are they not complicit?" Her words echoed Julian's own philosophical musings, his dissection of societal complicity. I spent hours with Matteo, Eliana's grandfather, listening to his tales of the old days, when the river was clean, when the fishing boats brought in bountiful catches, When the community thrived, he spoke of the chemical plant with a quiet, simmering rage, recounting tales of deformed fish, dying birds, and children with strange illnesses. "They poison us, detective," he said, his voice raspy with emotion. "Slowly, quietly, and the city, it looks away because we are small, we are forgotten." "And Arthur Finch?" I asked gently. He spat, a bitter taste in his mouth. "He was just another worm feeding on the dying flesh of our community. He took the last boat from my son, leaving him with nothing. He took the last hope from many families. The river swallowed him, just like it swallows all impurities, eventually." I realized that the River King wasn't a secret society or a clandestine group of conspirators. It was a shared understanding, a tacit agreement, an unspoken pact born of desperation. The effigy wasn't just a warning to Harrison. It was a rallying cry for the community, a visible manifestation of their collective pain and their defiant resolve. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but I knew who it was. Anya, still swimming in the deep end. Julian's voice, low and resonant, was a welcome anchor in the swirling currents of my investigation. "I'm learning to hold my breath," I replied, a faint smile touching my lips. "Your insights were accurate. It's a collective, a communal justice, and Harrison's effigy was just the beginning." "I suspected as much," he said, a note of quiet triumph in his voice. "The city's true nature is not found in its glittering towers, but in its dark, forgotten corners. The River King is a powerful entity, Anya. It draws its strength from the very neglect it seeks to punish." "I'm trying to negotiate, Julian," I confessed, "to find a way to address their grievances, to prevent further acts." He chuckled, a soft, melancholic sound. "A noble pursuit, my dear detective. But the river, once roused, is difficult to placate. It demands true repentance, not just token gestures. What does Harrison truly care about? His image, his power, his wealth. Not the health of the river, not the lives of the fishermen. Until that changes, the river will continue to demand its due." "So, you believe there will be more?" I asked, a knot tightening in my stomach. "I believe the River King will not rest until the scales are truly balanced," he said, his voice dropping, becoming more intimate. "And sometimes, Anya, balance requires a heavy price. You saw it with Luca. You saw it with me. The pursuit of justice, in its purest form, often demands a sacrifice. What are you willing to sacrifice, Anya, to truly serve justice?" His question hung in the air, a profound, unsettling challenge. What was I willing to sacrifice? My career, my principles, my own sense of right and wrong? The lines I had once held so dear were now blurred beyond recognition, painted in the shifting hues of the river's murky depths. I presented my findings to Ramon, a detailed report outlining the systemic neglect, the environmental damage, the profound desperation of the dock community. I argued for a multi-pronged approach, a full investigation into the chemical plant's environmental impact, a public forum for the community to voice their grievances, and a commitment from the city to address the issues. Ramon, surprisingly, listened. The public humiliation of Harrison had rattled the city hall. The mayor, facing increasing pressure from environmental groups and civil rights activists, was forced to take the issue seriously. "All right, Anya," he said, his voice weary but resolute. "You've got your forum. You've got your investigation. But you ride herd on that community. No more effigies. No more judgments. We need to show them the system can work." The public forum was a tense affair. Councilman Harrison, looking chastened and significantly less arrogant, sat opposite Mateo and other community leaders. The air crackled with raw emotion, years of pent-up anger finally given a voice. I stood beside Ramon, a silent sentinel, watching the drama unfold. The community spoke, their voices clear, articulate, and filled with a quiet, simmering rage. They presented their evidence, photos of dying fish, medical records of sick children, testimonials of ruined livelihoods. Harrison, for the first time, seemed to truly listen. The weight of public scrutiny, the undeniable evidence, and the palpable anger of the community finally broke through his arrogant facade. He stammered, he apologized, he promised a full re-evaluation, a commitment to environmental remediation. It was a small victory, a fragile truce, but a victory nonetheless. As the forum concluded, I caught Eliana's eye. She offered a small, knowing smile, a flicker of hope in her wide brown eyes. "The river," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the murmuring crowd. "It listens, detective. And sometimes it can be appeased." But as I walked out into the bruised twilight, the city's neon bleeding onto the rain, slicked streets, Julian's words echoed in my mind. Asterisk, the river, once roused, is difficult to placate. It demands true repentance, not just token gestures. Asterisk, had we truly appeased the river? Or had we merely bought ourselves a temporary reprieve? The question lingered, a haunting whisper in the abyss, reminding me that the pursuit of justice was an endless, complex journey, and that the city's deepest currents ran far deeper than any law could reach. The city, a sprawling canvas of human ambition and neglect, seemed to hold its breath in the aftermath of the municipal marina incident and the subsequent public forum. A fragile truce, a brittle peace had settled over the bruised twilight, but for me, Anya Sharma, it felt less like a resolution and more like the uneasy quiet before a deeper storm. Councilman Harrison, humbled and visibly shaken, had made his apologies, his promises. The city, in a rare moment of public accountability, had pledged investigations and remediation. But Julian's words, whispered across a silent phone line, echoed in my mind like a persistent, unsettling current. The river, once roused, is difficult to placate. It demands true repentance, not just token gestures. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the River King's wrath was not so easily mollified. The days that followed were a peculiar blend of frantic activity and watchful waiting. The precinct, under Ramon's grudging direction, initiated a full environmental impact study of the chemical plant, dispatching teams to the docks to interview residents and gather data. It was a bureaucratic ballet, a slow, ponderous dance designed to appease public outcry without truly addressing the festering wound. Harrison, ever the politician, made a few performative gestures, a press conference at the docks promising a new era of cooperation, a photo op shaking hands with Matteo, his smile strained, his eyes still holding a flicker of the contempt he'd so openly displayed. But the core issues, the systemic neglect, the ingrained arrogance of power remained, a deep-seated rot beneath the polished surface. "He's playing a game, Anya," Miller grumbled one afternoon, watching a news report of Harrison touring the chemical plant, flanked by smiling executives. "He's buying time. He thinks he can weather the storm, let the public forget, and then it'll be business as usual." I nodded, staring at the screen, a familiar frustration tightening my jaw. "I know, Miller. The community knows it too. You can feel it down there. They're wary. They're watching. They're waiting." Zoe, ever the bright spot in the precinct's gloom, burst into my office, her electric blue streaks almost vibrating with excitement. "Anya, you're not going to believe what Dr. Marquez and I found in the latest river samples." She thrust a series of magnified images onto my monitor. "Remember the unique pigment from the effigy, the river clay, mussel shells, algae? Well, we found it again. In higher concentrations, and mixed with it, trace elements of a rare, highly toxic heavy metal. It's been leaching into the river, undetected, for years. And guess where the highest concentrations are? My eyes widened as I looked at the overlaid map. Upstream from the chemical plant. Bingo, Zoe beamed. And this heavy metal, it's known to cause severe neurological damage, birth defects. It's a slow, silent killer. This isn't just about destroying livelihoods, Anya. This is about poisoning entire generations. The revelation hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just environmental damage. It was a slow-motion massacre. The River King's rage, Mateo's quiet fury, Eliana's artistic anguish, it was all terrifyingly justified. The city's blind eye, its indifference, was bordering on complicity in a crime far more insidious than any single murder. I immediately brought the findings to Ramon. His face, usually a mask of controlled authority, paled as he reviewed Zoe's data. Heavy metals? Neurological damage? This changes everything. This isn't just a PR nightmare, Anya. This is a criminal investigation. This is manslaughter. Or worse, I said, my voice tight with suppressed anger. And Harrison, as the councilman who approved the plant, knew or should have known. He's directly responsible. Ramon's phone rang. Its insistent buzz cutting through the sudden silence in the room. He answered, his expression growing grimmer with each passing word. He hung up, his eyes meeting mine, a new kind of dread etched on his face. That was the mayor's office, Councilman Harrison. He's gone missing. My stomach dropped. Missing? When? Sometime last night. His security detail found his apartment empty this morning. No signs of forced entry. Just gone. Ramon ran a hand through his hair, his voice laced with a desperate urgency. They want you on this, Anya, now. They think the River King has finally made its move, and this time it won't be an effigy. The city, once again, felt like a glittering beast exhaling toxic breath. The fragile truce had shattered. The River King had claimed its true prize. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but I knew who it was. The ghost in the labyrinthine. Anya. The river has claimed its due, hasn't it? Julian's voice, low and resonant, was laced with a chilling prescience. How did you know? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The city whispers, Anya, he replied, a faint, sardonic amusement in his tone. And I listen. I told you, the river demands true repentance, not just token gestures. Harrison's promises were hollow. His actions, or lack thereof, sealed his fate. Do you know where he is? I pressed, my heart hammering against my ribs. He paused, a long, pregnant silence stretching between us. I know where the river gathers its strength, Anya, where it remembers its pain, and where it exacts its ultimate judgment. The old pumping station, near the mouth of the canal. It's a place of forgotten history, of submerged secrets, a place where the city's heart truly bleeds. The old pumping station, a derelict, crumbling monument to the city's industrial past, shrouded in perpetual mist and the acrid scent of decay. It was a place I knew from my initial investigations into the dock community, a place Eliana had mentioned as a spiritual heartland for the River King legend. Julian, I said, my voice tight with urgency. Is he alive? The river is patient, Anya, he replied, his voice enigmatic. It waits, but it also cleanses. You must understand, this is not about individual malice. This is about balance, about a community, reclaiming its agency, its dignity. They believe they are purifying the river and by extension themselves. And you condone this? I demanded, a fresh wave of anger washing over me. He sighed, a sound of profound weariness. I understand it, Anya. There's a difference. I understand the desperation that drives people to such extremes when all other avenues of justice are closed to them. Just as I understood Luca's twisted logic, even as I condemned his methods. The city, in its blindness, creates its own monsters, its own avengers. I have to go there, I said, my decision made. Be careful, Anya, he cautioned, his voice now laced with a familiar concern. The depths are colder than you think, and sometimes the truth you seek, it can drown you. The line went dead, leaving me with the chilling echo of his words. I briefed Ramon and Miller, relaying Julian's cryptic lead. Ramon, despite his skepticism, had few other options. All right, Sharma, get a team, tactical, but go in quiet. No sirens, no flashing lights. We don't want to spook them. And Anya, bring him back alive. If he's still alive. The old pumping station was a place of oppressive silence, broken only by the rhythmic drip of water and the distant, mournful cries of gulls. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete, stagnant water, and something else, something metallic and acrid that made my stomach churn. The building itself was a hulking, skeletal structure, its grimy windows staring out like blind eyes into the perpetual mist. My team, a small, hand-picked group of plainclothes officers, moved with practiced stealth, their footsteps barely disturbing the dust-laden floor. Miller was beside me, his face grim, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. Zoe, her small bag of forensic tools clutched in her hand, was a few paces behind, her eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and relentless curiosity. We found them in the main chamber, a vast, circular space dominated by the decaying machinery of the old pumps. The air here was heavy, thick with the scent of river water, and something ceremonial, something primal. Councilman Harrison was there, bound and gagged, suspended precariously above a deep, churning pool of water, his face a mask of terror. His eyes, wide and unfocused, darted frantically between his captors and the dark, swirling depths beneath him. Standing around the pool, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of lanterns, were members of the dock community. Matteo, his gnarled hands clasped, his face a picture of grim resolve. Eliana, her wide brown eyes now holding a disturbing, almost fanatical gleam, stood beside him, a small, intricately carved wooden fish clutched in her hand. There were others, weathered fishermen, their wives, even some of the younger generation, their faces a mixture of fear and defiant solidarity. It was not a mob, it was a community, united in a terrible, collective purpose. Councilman Harrison, Matteo's voice, low and resonant, echoed through the cavernous space. You have poisoned our river. You have poisoned our children. You have betrayed the sacred trust of the water. And now, the river demands its due. Matteo, I called out, my voice cutting through the tension, my presence revealing the tactical team. Stop this. This isn't justice. This is murder. Their heads snapped towards me, a collective gasp rippling through the group. Eliana's eyes, once so open and guileless, now narrowed, filled with a sudden cold fury. Detective Sharma, you seek to protect the betrayer. You seek to deny the river its righteous anger. We have the evidence, Matteo, I pleaded, stepping forward, my hands raised in a gesture of peace. Zoe has confirmed the heavy metals, the poisoning. The city is launching a full criminal investigation. Harrison will face justice through the law. You don't need to do this. Matteo looked at me, his eyes filled with a profound weariness. The law, detective. The law has failed us for decades. It has ignored our pleas, dismissed our suffering. It took the River King to make the city listen. And now the River King must complete its judgment. This isn't the River King, Matteo, I argued, trying to appeal to his sense of community, his understanding of the consequences. This is a community taking the law into its own hands. And you will all pay the price. You will all be arrested. Your families will suffer. Is that the justice you seek? Eliana stepped forward, her voice rising, filled with a chilling conviction. The river demands balance, detective. And for the poison he has unleashed, he must become one with the water. She raised the carved fish, its wooden eyes staring blankly. Harrison, seeing his imminent demise, began to struggle against his bonds, his muffled cries echoing desperately in the chamber. Eliana, no, I shouted, lunging forward, but it was too late. With a swift, decisive movement, Matteo cut the rope. Harrison plunged into the churning pool below, a muffled splash echoing through the chamber. The water, dark and opaque, swallowed him whole. A collective gasp, then a profound, unsettling silence descended upon the chamber. My team moved in, securing the perimeter, apprehending Matteo and Eliana and the other members of the community. There was no resistance, no struggle, just a quiet, grim acceptance. Their act was done, their judgment rendered. I rushed to the edge of the pool, peering into the dark, swirling depths. The water, thick with the heavy metals and the river's silent anger, swirled ominously. There was no sign of Harrison. He was gone. Consumed by the river he had poisoned. Eliana, her hands cuffed, looked at me, her eyes devoid of their earlier fanaticism, now filled with a strange, quiet triumph. The river has claimed its due, detective. The balance has been restored. I stared at the dark water, my mind reeling. The River King had spoken, and its many hands had exacted its ultimate judgment. My duty screamed betrayal, but my heart, foolish and vulnerable, ached with a raw, undeniable understanding of the despair that had driven them to this desperate act. The pursuit of justice had led me to the edge of an abyss, where the lines between right and wrong, between victim and perpetrator, had dissolved into the unsettling depths of the city's conscience. The neon lights of the city continued to bleed, and I, Anya Sharma, stood at the precipice, forever marked by the river's wrath and the haunting, profound truth of its unsettling depths. The city, a sprawling canvas of human ambition and neglect, now held its breath, not in anticipation, but in a profound, unsettling silence. The old pumping station, a derelict monument to forgotten industry, echoed with the chilling finality of the river's judgment. Councilman Harrison, once a titan of civic power, had vanished into the churning depths, swallowed by the very waters he had so carelessly poisoned. The air, thick with the metallic tang of heavy metals and the acrid scent of fear, now also carried the bitter perfume of consequence. For me, Anya Sharma, standing at the precipice of that dark swirling pool, the lines between right and wrong, between justice and vengeance, had dissolved into an agonizing, opaque murk. My team, a disciplined unit, even in the face of such unprecedented events, moved swiftly. The arrests were made, not with the usual struggle or defiance, but with a quiet, grim acceptance that was far more unnerving. Matteo, his gnarled hands now cuffed behind his back, looked at me with eyes that held no remorse, only a profound, weary triumph. Eliana, her youthful face streaked with tears, yet her gaze defiantly resolute, clutched the carved wooden fish, her small fingers still tracing its scales, as if it were a talisman of a justice finally served. The other members of the dock community, a dozen or so men and women, offered no resistance, their collective silence more powerful than any protest. They had made their statement. Their judgment was rendered. Any sign of him, Anya? Miller's voice, usually a steady anchor, was strained, his eyes scanning the dark, roiling water. A makeshift searchlight, hastily rigged, cut through the gloom, illuminating the churning surface. I shook my head, my throat tight. Nothing. The current's strong here, and the water, it's deep, and filled with decades of the city's waste. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. Harrison consumed by the very poison he had unleashed. Zoe, her face pale but her resolve unwavering, was already collecting samples from the pool, her gloved hands moving with meticulous precision. The heavy metal concentrations are off the charts here, detective. This water, it's practically a chemical cocktail. If he swallowed any of this, even if he survived the fall, he wouldn't last long. The scene was processed with a grim efficiency that belied the emotional maelstrom churning within me. Every piece of evidence, every sample, every statement, meticulously documented. But how do you document the collective will of a community? How do you categorize the despair that drives people to such desperate acts? Back at the cold precinct, the fluorescent lights felt harsher, colder than usual, illuminating every crack in the facade I was desperately trying to maintain. Ramon's office was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. The mayor's office was in an uproar, demanding answers, arrests, a swift resolution. The media, a ravenous beast, was already circling, their headlines screaming of a city official's disappearance, of a community's violent retaliation. Anya, what the hell are we going to do? Ramon paced his office, his voice a low growl. We have a dozen people in custody, all admitting to varying degrees of involvement in Harrison's disappearance, but none of them are talking about who actually cut the rope. They're all saying the same thing. The river claimed its due. It's a goddamn nightmare. They're not confessing to murder, Chief, I clarified, leaning against the doorframe, my exhaustion a palpable weight. They're confessing to an act of communal justice. They genuinely believe the river itself acted, through them, to restore balance. Communal justice doesn't hold up in court, Anya. Ramon exploded, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. We need a perpetrator, a single, identifiable individual who cut that rope, who threw Harrison into the water. Mateo cut the rope, Chief, I stated, my voice flat. Eliana was beside him, urging him on. The rest were witnesses, accomplices by their silence and their presence. Ramon stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. You're telling me a 70-year-old fisherman and a 22-year-old art student are our primary suspects for the murder of a city councilman, and the rest of the dock community are co-conspirators in a collective murder plot? That's what the evidence suggests, Chief, I said, meeting his gaze. And their motive is clear. Years of systemic neglect, environmental poisoning, and the belief that the law would never hold Harrison accountable. They felt they had no other choice. Miller, who had been quietly observing, interjected, his voice grave. Ramon, I've been talking to the DA. He's already saying this is going to be the most complex prosecution this city has ever seen. Public sympathy is going to be split. Half the city will see them as villains, the other half as folk heroes. And the environmental data, it's damning against Harrison. It makes their actions, however illegal, understandable. Understandable, Miller, not justifiable, Ramon retorted, slamming his fist on his desk. We uphold the law. We don't let people take it into their own hands, no matter how much we sympathize with their plight. If we let this stand, it sets a dangerous precedent. We'll have every aggrieved community enacting their own justice. And if we don't address the root causes, Chief, I countered, stepping forward, If we don't show them that the law times can times work, then this precedent will be set anyway. They'll just find new ways to act outside the system. This isn't just about prosecuting a crime. It's about restoring faith in the institutions. It's about showing them that the city isn't blind to their suffering. The argument raged for hours, a battle between legal precedent and moral ambiguity, between the letter of the law and the spirit of justice. The political fallout was immense. The mayor, desperate to quell the public outcry and avoid further embarrassment, ordered a full, transparent investigation into the chemical plant and Harrison's dealings. But the pressure to prosecute Matteo and Eliana and the others was immense. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but I knew. Anya. The city is a fascinating specimen, isn't it? Julian's voice, low and resonant, was a familiar balm, a dangerous comfort in the chaos. The waters are churning, and the foundations are trembling. Harrison's gone, Julian, I said, my voice heavy. Matteo cut the rope. Eliana urged him on. We have them all in custody. And you, Anya, he mused, a faint, sardonic amusement in his tone. You witnessed the ultimate act of communal justice. The River King in its purest, most brutal form. Does it feel balanced? It feels complicated, Julian, I admitted, running a hand over my tired face. It feels like a tragedy for everyone involved. Tragedy and justice often walk hand in hand, Anya, he replied, his voice dropping, becoming more intimate, especially when the scales are tipped so far out of balance. You saw the evidence, the heavy metals, the poisoned generations. What is the value of one man's life, however powerful, against the slow, silent death of an entire community? The river, Anya, demanded its due, and its children, its many hands, delivered it. And what about the law, Julian? I pressed, a familiar anger flaring within me. What about the rule of law? Does that mean nothing? He sighed, a sound of profound weariness. The law, Anya, is a human construct, often flawed, often blind. As I've told you, it's a reflection of society's values. And when society's values are corrupted, when its institutions fail, then the law itself becomes a tool of injustice. The River King, it is a raw primal response to that failure. It's the sound of the unheard, finally screaming. So, you condone this? I asked again, the question a desperate plea for clarity, for a definitive answer in a world of unsettling grays. I understand it, Anya, he clarified, his voice gentle yet firm. There's a difference. I understand the desperation that drives people to such extremes, just as I understood Luca's twisted logic, even as I condemned his methods. The city, in its blindness, creates its own monsters, its own avengers. And sometimes, Anya, those avengers are not individuals, but an entire community, driven to the precipice of survival. He paused, then added, his voice now laced with a familiar concern. You are caught in the current, Anya. You understand their pain, their desperation. You also understand the necessity of the law. You are walking a treacherous path. What will you do with this understanding? How will you reconcile these opposing truths? His question hung in the air, a profound, unsettling challenge. What was I willing to sacrifice? My career? My principles? My own sense of right and wrong? The lines I had once held so dear were now blurred beyond recognition, painted in the shifting hues of the river's murky depths. I visited Matteo and Eliana in their holding cells. Matteo sat in stoic silence, his gaze fixed on some distant horizon, a man at peace with his actions. Eliana, however, was more agitated, her youthful idealism now tinged with a raw, defiant conviction. "They'll never understand, detective," Eliana said, her voice raspy, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. "They live in their towers, disconnected from the river, from the earth. They don't see the poison. They don't hear the cries. They only see what they want to see." "I understand, Eliana," I said, my voice soft. "I saw the evidence, the heavy metals, the damage, and the city is taking it seriously now. There will be an investigation. Harrison's actions will be exposed." She scoffed, a bitter sound. "Too little, too late, detective. How many more generations will be poisoned before they act? How many more lives will be ruined? Harrison deserved what he got. The river demanded it." "That's not for you to decide, Eliana," I countered, a familiar edge returning to my voice. "That's what the law is for. No matter how flawed it may be, it's the only thing that stands between us and chaos." "Chaos?" she laughed, a short, sharp burst of sound. "We were living in chaos, detective. A slow, silent chaos that was killing us all. This was an act of clarity. An act of survival." Her conviction was unsettling. Her unwavering belief in the righteousness of their actions, a mirror to Luca's own fanaticism, albeit rooted in a different kind of desperation. How do you argue with that level of conviction? How do you prosecute a community that believes it has enacted a higher justice? The legal battle that ensued was indeed unprecedented. The DA, facing immense public pressure and the undeniable environmental evidence, struggled to build a case. The dock community, though in custody, remained a wall of silence, united in their narrative of the River King's judgment. My testimony, detailing the systemic neglect and the profound desperation that had driven them to this point, was a double-edged sword. It explained their motivations, but it also highlighted the failures of the very system I represented. Ramon, despite his earlier anger, found himself caught between a rock and a hard place. The mayor, desperate to salvage his reputation and avoid further unrest, pushed for a resolution that would appease both sides. The city, in its own clumsy, bureaucratic way, began to slowly turn its attention to the docks, to the poisoned river, to the forgotten community. As the days turned into weeks, the legal proceedings became a convoluted dance of plea bargains and community outreach programs. Matteo, Eliana, and the others were eventually released, their charges significantly reduced, a testament to the complex nature of the case and the undeniable truth of their grievances. They were not celebrated as heroes, nor condemned as outright villains, but rather emerged as symbols of a city grappling with its own conscience. I watched them leave the precinct, their faces etched with a quiet dignity, a blend of weariness and a nascent hope. Eliana caught my eye and offered a small, knowing nod. The River King had spoken, and the city, however reluctantly, had finally begun to listen. But the victory, as always, felt haunted. Harrison was gone, consumed by the river. A community had found its voice, but at a terrible cost, and I, Anya Sharma, was left with the profound, unsettling truth that justice, in its purest form, was rarely found in the neat confines of a courtroom, but rather in the messy, often brutal depths of human experience. The neon lights of the city continued to bleed, and I walked through them, forever marked by the river's wrath and the unsettling, beautiful complexity of its many, many voices. The abyss, I realized, had indeed whispered back, and its secrets had changed me irrevocably. The city, a colossal, breathing entity, continued its ceaseless rhythm, its neon heartbeat a constant thrum against the bruised twilight. But for me, Anya Sharma. That rhythm was now a haunting echo, a melody played on a broken string, forever tinged with the melancholic understanding of its own profound depths. The River King case, with its complex legal dance and its unsettling communal justice, had finally reached a fragile, uneasy resolution. Matteo and Eliana, along with the others, were free, their charges reduced to misdemeanors, their act of desperate retribution acknowledged, if not entirely condoned, by a city that had been forced to look into its own festering wounds. Councilman Harrison, as predicted, was never found, swallowed by the very river he had so carelessly poisoned, a grim testament to the ultimate, unforgiving balance of nature. I was back in my meticulously ordered apartment, now feeling less like a sanctuary and more like a carefully constructed cage of my own making. The silence, once a comfort, was now heavy, pregnant with the weight of unspoken truths and the echoes of voices that still lingered in the quiet corners of my mind. The small, macabre sculpture of the silent lament sat on my mantel, a constant, unsettling reminder of Julian, of our connection, of the beauty and horror I now carried within me. Its tiny, almost imperceptible seed of hope, clutched in the figure's cupped hands, felt like a cruel irony, a whisper of a future that would never be. I ran a hand over the cool, smooth surface of the sculpture, remembering the moment Julian had first unveiled it in his studio, the single, perfectly sculpted tear, a testament to profound loss, to a past shrouded in tragedy. He had shown me his wound, and in doing so, he had exposed mine. He had seen past Lena Thorne, past Anya Sharma, into the haunted landscape of my soul, and that shared darkness, that unexpected intimacy, had been a potent, dangerous drug. The precinct had moved on, as it always did. New cases, new crises, new monsters to chase. Ramon, though still gruff, had given me a grudging respect, a silent acknowledgement of the unconventional path I had carved. Miller, ever the anchor, had simply watched me, his weary eyes holding a knowing sadness. He didn't need words. He understood the weight I now carried, the invisible scars that ran deeper than any physical wound. "You did good, Anya," he'd said one afternoon, after the final paperwork for the River King case had been filed. "You stopped a war. You forced the city to look at itself. That's more than most of us ever achieve." "At what cost, Miller?" I'd asked, staring out the precinct window at the bleeding neon of the city. "At what cost?" He'd sighed, running a hand over his grizzled jaw. "The cost of doing business in this city, kid. The cost of chasing shadows. It always leaves a mark." And it had. The mark was etched not just on my soul, but on my perception of the world. I saw the city differently now. No longer just a collection of crimes to be solved, but a living, breathing organism. Its glittering facade, a deceptive veneer over a festering underbelly of systemic injustice, of forgotten communities, of human desperation. The River King had taught me that justice was rarely clean, rarely confined to the neat boxes of legal statutes. It was a messy, often brutal, process enacted by imperfect people in a profoundly imperfect world. Julian, he had been right. About everything. About the city's true nature. About the collective unconscious. About the River King. He had been the one to guide me, to illuminate the shadows, even as he himself remained shrouded in them. His love, born of deception and violence, was a beautiful, terrible tragedy. A love that had been both my mission and my undoing. I found myself wondering about him sometimes. Where was he now? Was he still in the labyrinthine, a ghost in his own grand apartment complex, creating new art that spoke of the city's unsettled depths? Or had he truly retreated, vanished from the public eye, his genius now turned inward, his creations for himself alone? I saw shadows that could be him, fleeting glimpses across a rain-slicked street, a figure in a whispering cafe, his profile etched with that familiar intensity, but I never approached. There was no going back for us, no clean slate. Our story, born of such dangerous intimacy, could only exist in the realm of memory, a haunting melody that played in the quiet spaces of my heart. The phone rang, its sudden jolt pulling me from my reverie. It was Zoe. "Hey, Anya, you busy contemplating the meaning of life, or can I drag you into some actual police work?" Her voice, bright and irreverent, was a welcome dose of reality. "What have you got, Zoe?" I asked, a faint smile touching my lips. "Another weird one," she said, a note of excitement in her voice. "Down in the old financial district. Looks like a CEO. Found in his office, posed with a single perfectly balanced abacus on his chest, and a note written in some ancient script about the balance of ledgers. Dr. Marquez thinks it's another thematic killer. Someone with a very specific sense of economic justice." My breath hitched. An abacus, balance of ledgers, economic justice. The words resonated with a familiar, chilling echo. This was different from the Confessor, different from the River King, but it bore the undeniable stamp of a mind obsessed with judgment, with consequence, with the city's festering underbelly. "On my way, Zoe," I said, grabbing my coat. The familiar weight of my badge, a reassuring presence against my hip. As I stepped out of my apartment, the neon lights of the city bled their vibrant hues onto the rain-slicked streets, painting the world in shades of red and blue and gold. The city, I realized, was an endless story, a tapestry woven with threads of light and shadow, of dreams and regrets, of justice and its profound, often terrifying cost. And I, Anya Sharma, the brilliant detective, walked through it, forever changed. The truth I had sought had shattered us both, leaving me with a haunting question. In the pursuit of justice, what parts of herself had she sacrificed? The answer, I knew, was everything and nothing. Because in that sacrifice, she had found a new kind of sight, a new kind of understanding, a new way to navigate the abyss. The kiss of a killer, a love that was both her mission and her undoing, had marked her, yes, but it had also forged her into something stronger, something more profound, something forever attuned to the unspoken epilogue of the city's bruised heart. The work continued, as did the whispers, and I, Anya Sharma, was ready to listen. Author's reflection. As I close this final page, I find myself lingering in the quiet spaces the story has left behind, like the echo of footsteps fading down a long corridor. Every word, once written, belongs as much to you as it does to me, and in that shared space, we've walked together through the neon-drenched streets and shadowed alleys of a city that feels both distant and impossibly close. This tale, Kiss Me, Killer, began as a flicker of an idea. What happens when the hunter becomes entangled with the hunted, when duty clashes with an undeniable, dangerous connection? It grew from a fascination with the moral ambiguities that define our modern world, the blurred lines between justice and vengeance, and the profound human need for connection even in the darkest of places. Anya's journey from the steely resolve of a detective to the haunted wisdom of a woman forever marked by love and loss speaks to the transformations we all undergo when confronted with truths that challenge our core beliefs. Julian, with his unsettling charisma and his profound insights, was always meant to be more than just a suspect. He was the catalyst, the mirror reflecting back to Anya and to us the complexities of human nature. And the city itself, a character in its own right, with its glittering facade and its festering underbelly, became a metaphor for the intricate, often contradictory, landscape of the human heart. I'm grateful for your companionship on this reflective journey. Perhaps you saw yourself between the lines. Perhaps you discovered something new about the delicate balance between order and chaos, or the enduring power of empathy in a world that often feels cold and indifferent. Stories end, but the feelings they stir stay alive, in you, in me, in all who let them in. It is my hope that Anya's journey, her haunted victory, leaves you with a sense of understanding, a touch of melancholy, and a quiet appreciation for the profound beauty found even in the most shadowed corners of our shared human experience. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for walking with me through these pages. Corners of our shared human experience. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for walking with me through these pages.